Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this joint meeting of the Healdsburg City Council and the Redevelopment and Successor Agency. It is February 20th, 2018, and let the record reflect all Healdsburg City Council members are present, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, I'd like to invite a motion to approve tonight's agenda, but before that, I'd like to ask my fellow council members, are there any requests for tonight's agenda or order?
I would request that we move the matters of interest to the end of the meeting, as we discussed in our session last week.
All right, and I already did that, so your request is granted by the mayor.
Very good.
But thank you for reminding us of what we're valuing tonight, which is to move it along. All right, so.
Move for approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we clearly have an agenda that is going to meet our needs tonight. All right, I'm going to now also ask you to consider a motion to approve the minutes from 3 different meetings, January 22nd, January 29th, and February 5th.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes stand as approved. So there are no announcements or presentations tonight, but as per our City Council decision, we will have the council reports on matters of interest and expense reports at the end of our meeting to support what we all want to do tonight, which is to move the meeting along. And so that'll follow new business. And that is also a time for members to request if they want placement of items on the agenda for future agenda items for our meetings. All right, moving on. We're going to now move to the city manager and ask if he has a report for us tonight.
I don't have anything, start over. Nothing to report other than to state that we are excited to begin the community survey, which should be starting this week with FM3, trying to gauge where the community is with regards to items which this council will be weighing in on with upcoming goals and budgets and things like that. The intent of the survey is to get an assessment of where the community is with things such as roads, streets, parks, city services, what we can do to improve in certain areas. We'll also be gauging interest in assessments of where we are with regards to some development projects as well. So our hope is that over the next few weeks, the community will, when the phone rings and somebody on the other line says you have 20 minutes, please pick up the phone and spend 20 minutes with the surveyors so we can get a good assessment of where we are as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager, for letting us know about that. All right, moving on to public comments on non-agenda items. So again, this is time set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest not on this agenda, but related to the City Council. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, we're not allowed to consider any of the issues tonight or take any action or any requests during this comment period. Speakers are encouraged to limit their comments to 3 minutes. And we do have a signal here. The yellow means you're down to 30 seconds, right? So we're going to be fair about time here. And all speakers that would like to speak tonight, we are going to ask you to sign in if you'd be willing to. There's a clipboard up there, and that helps with our record keeping to make sure we know who's speaking. So I just want to clarify this is for non-agenda items. And may I ask who's planning or wishing to speak tonight on non-agenda items? Is anyone speaking tonight? Okay, just one. Okay, well, upon being acknowledged, which I'm glad to acknowledge you in a minute, you're going to step up to the podium and speak into the microphone and just state your name clearly and your address, if you're willing to do so our records can accurately identify your presence tonight. So welcome, please.
Hello, my name is Dennis Carvalho, 190 Old Rossi Place here in Healdsburg. What I'd like to do is request a permit. 7 months ago, I applied for a permit on 190 Old Rossi Place, and I got all staff reports and everything back, and turned in everything that was requested. And then, so 4 months later, or say 7 months later, I submit another application for a different application. And now they lump in all the stuff from the my original request, which is a total separate application to get a building permit. Now they lump it in a couple weeks ago with more conditions, stalling my permit. My permit's been stalled in Public Works for over 3 months. It was submitted over 7 months ago. We have everything they need. And I'd like to request that my building permit get issued. We've got a housing need right now, and I've been honestly sitting there stalled for 3 months. Our building permit, everything that I know that they possibly could ask for has been given to them. And then on this original list, it says when any phase triggers those requirements, future phases of this subdivision likely would require this lot to be brought into compliance with the rest of the requirements found in an LID manual, the stormwater manual. Well, the lot and the house that I submitted for a building permit did not trigger stormwater stuff. I submitted a tentative map application 7 months later. Now they're saying it triggers it. I should have had a permit in hand 3 months ago. I'd appreciate if somebody would look into it and get back to me. This is really a sad situation. 3 months sitting there doing nothing. That permit absolutely has been lingering, could have been released, and the stormwater stuff did not trigger the single house to have anything done. And now they're claiming that it does. We submitted all the work. Now we got to go through plan check, but we've spent over $20,000 on bringing it up to whatever they're asking for. But it's in regard to the new subdivision request, not the single house that I submitted 7 months earlier. I appreciate somebody looking into it and getting back to me as soon as possible. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on a non-agenda item tonight? Okay, so I will close public comment now on non-agenda items and move to the next item, which is consent calendar. So again, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, roll call. Thank you, City Clerk.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Nayokas?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, now we're moving on the agenda to our public hearing, which is the citywide design guidelines and land use code amendment. And this is to conduct the public hearing to discuss the citywide design guidelines and to, by resolution, adopt them and introduce them for first reading tonight by title only. So I believe we're going to hand it over to our Director DeRosa. So thank you for being here. This has been a long process, and here we are. So thank you for sharing what you're going to share.
Thank you. And just give me one moment. I am actually going to speed dial in our wonderful consultant who is always joining me for the public hearings. He is in Colorado, so let me just get him on the line to listen in. Hey, Brad. Hey, it's Maya. Let me just put you on speaker. I'm getting ready to roll with the presentation. Okay? Okay, thanks. Okay, I am
Thank you so
ready.
much.
Good evening, Mayor Mansell and members of the City Council. It's my pleasure to bring to you this evening for your consideration the citywide design guidelines and the associated land use code amendments. Just to review the item in your staff report that makes a recommendation for 3 actions tonight. The first would be to conduct a public hearing to discuss the citywide design guidelines. Then to also by resolution adopt the citywide design guidelines. And third, introduce for first reading by title only an ordinance amending the city's municipal code for consistency with the citywide design guidelines. So I know we had a joint session in December with the Planning Commission. I'm just going to provide a few highlights of background for the benefit of the audience and also to refresh us all with the process that we've been through and why are we here tonight. So why are we updating the design guidelines? Well, the first item relates to, it's one of our general plan implementation actions. Implementation measure CD2 is to revise and update our design review guidelines. And then there are 2 goals that support that as well, which include preservation and enhancement of the most desirable qualities of Healdsburg's built environment, and also goal CDB, preservation and enhancement of the downtown and Healdsburg Plaza. I know some of you were able to attend our outreach meetings. We had 4 community workshops over a year's time. We also conducted 4 focus groups. We had contractors, architects, designers on those. And then also to keep the information flowing for updates where people could access materials if they weren't able to attend the meetings, we created the Design Healdsburg website. And so this is a snapshot of what we did when we went out to the community. So it started with that first meeting, the January 26th back in 2016, where the council and the planning commission came together and decided, yes, we want to do this and commit the funds and the staffing resources. And then that was followed in November 1st, 2016, the CHC had a meeting to discuss the relevance of the project. And then we conducted focus groups November 1st and August 30th of 2017, again with the contractors and architects. And then we held 4 community workshops, the biggest one being at the end on August 30th, which was our open house, where we released the very first draft and we got the majority of our comments. We had open house stations, which you may recall. And then we took those comments, revised a draft, released it in November, and then had a meeting on December 5th with the Planning Commission and Council to discuss that and invited the public to attend. And then most recently, on January 23rd, the Planning Commission held a public hearing to consider the project and recommended approval. Along with that public outreach, we did a variety of electronic notifications, press releases. We did 2 press releases on November 21st and August 11th of 2017. Social media blasts. I know we also had Nextdoor in addition to City's Facebook page. We created a stakeholder list, so when people came to our public meetings, we had them sign in, and each time we would add more people to that and let them know of upcoming meetings and opportunities to participate. We did bilingual flyers, and then, of course, the guidelines document was circulated for all the city departments to comment on as well. And here's a view of one of the publications from the Healdsburg Tribune, which took our press release and published that on August 16th of our open house. So the previous actions leading to where we were today is, so we do have a design review manual. It was last updated in 2009, originally created in 1990. And if any of you have looked at it, you realize that there's been a lot of new development that's happened that's kind of required we take a new look and a new focus to refresh the guidelines. So this document is much more comprehensive, and it's helpful to staff, the property owners, and the Planning Commission. How is it different? It addresses the entire city. It's much more illustrative, consistent organization, and we've also included historic guidelines. So the rest of my presentation is going to be broken up into 2 sections. I'm going to talk a little bit about, give you a little bit more deeper overview of the design guidelines, followed by the land use code update. This is just a summary of the table of contents. So as you can see, in addition to the introduction and history, it has some chapter 3, the overarching broad principles of what is good design. And then we broke it down further into the city has various character areas, which I'll show you on a map in a moment. And then we also looked at what would be the most common things people would be looking for help from this document. So that would be single family, small scale residential, commercial, industrial, mixed use, large scale multifamily. And then we have everything in between of all development types. And again, we added how to treat historic resources and public realm design guidelines. And then an appendix, which includes landscape street tree palettes, and also character defining features of historic buildings. So as I mentioned, we have one chapter that just focuses on the various character areas, and primarily what that chapter will talk about is when you see this map, which was actually created by our community in a workshop, they drew circles around the areas that had true identifiable characteristics. So it will state what is the existing character of this area, what are the key considerations for future development, what should be considered related to the site and building design, and then also notation that the gray areas you see represent specific plans or neighborhood plans, and so those we would defer to those documents for the design guidance. So what did we change since August 10th? We met with our stakeholder groups and they gave us some additional feedback in addition to the public. We made it a little bit more user-friendly. We did a little bit better job of labeling and cross-referencing our terminology. We increased the flexibility for infill design on character areas 2 and 3. We added clarifications, new content, and updated the photographs. And how is it different from the current design review manual? Like I said, it is an entire city addressed, more illustrative material. It has a consistent organization. We have clear zoning and engineering standards and historic guidelines. So as you know, we had the meeting on December 5th, 2017. There was direction given to staff from that input that we received. And to summarize that, we were asked to clarify how the design guidelines differ from the land use code in the zoning perspective, to address color choice and compatibility, to more directly encourage public art within private project development, strengthen the guidance for solar technology in both residential and non-residential areas, promote dark sky principles and rooftop design, encourage ground floor transparency along the street, enhance the guidelines for Character Area 6 related to building orientation, enhancing guidelines for Character Area 7 to clarify the development vision for this area, which includes the Dry Creek Road Gateway, modifying guidelines for Character 8 to encourage building wall articulation, which is our industrial area, and enhancing guidelines to encourage planting large canopy trees. And then our last round of public input on January 23rd of the Planning Commission, we received some additional guidance for revisions, which included to revise the Character Area 2 objectives to encourage more flexibility to ensure that two-story buildings are not discouraged. And then we added text to Chapter 1, which clarifies which projects require design review approval and also specifying where the design guidelines would be mandatory versus advisory. And then we modified the boundary of Character Area 5, which is the downtown core, extending it north to Piper Street on the west side of Healdsburg Avenue. So how are we going to administer the design guidelines? Essentially, and I think this slide is probably familiar from the December meeting when Nori Winter was here. We basically have 3 types of review. The first one, where we have really no change involved, is our major design review process, which involves projects such as your large commercial projects, 2 units, residential, 2 or more, designated historic resources, and some signs. And then we have a minor design review, which is approved at the staff level, and some minor changes to non-residential are included. New single-family second-story additions or significant changes to a primary facade in Character Area 1. And then in terms of new, all other projects that were requiring a building permit. So if you're outside of Character Area 1, the design guidelines would just be advisory. And this would apply to your building permits are general single-family site work and small improvements. So how are we currently doing the major design review process? As I mentioned, it is approved by the Planning Commission, and the list of projects includes your basic commercial, industrial, and office. This is new development. And residential projects where it's 2 or more, and if we're making a major change on a previously developed site, or a change of use with substantial changes to a site or building modifications. Projects subject to Planning Commission approvals, such as subdivisions and use permits, and signs part of a larger project. And what does our minor design review process today involve? So it's approved at a staff level by the planning and building director. And the types of projects that fall in that category would be a minor change to a non-residential building exterior, change to a non-residential site, change of use to non-residential, but not substantial change. Single-family construction, and generally the criteria for that is on a site uphill and visible from a scenic road, within a scenic ridgeline corridor, or in the Grove Street neighborhood plan. And we do have 2 historic districts in the city where any certain changes are under the review by the historic committee, and that includes construction within the overlay area and accessory buildings over 400 square feet. Demolition requires review by the historic committee, and alterations to existing buildings where you're increasing the floor area by more than 25%. So what would change with the new design guidelines? So we would look for new work to be consistent with it. Other signs not subject to minor or major design review, accessory structures, water efficient landscaping, residential visitor lodging, alterations to non-designated historic resources, and new single family and exterior alterations in Character Area 1. And what would change? Again, this is a continuation of a discussion on, you can see the map of Character Area 1, which is generally bounded by Powell on the north, 2nd Street on the east, Center Street on the west, and Mason on the south. And this would be triggered by a new 2nd-story addition or a significant change to the primary facade, such as closing up windows and closing a porch, things like that. Excuse me. So there's that map again. And then for non-designated historic resources, modifications to those would be as mapped at the staff level or includes any type of ordinary repair. And within a historic district, we decided to streamline the review process and delete ADUs from requiring design review, as long as they're consistent with the design guidelines. All other work would be consistent with the citywide design guidelines, is one of the things that we've added for clarification in the code. And review by the historic committee for alterations that involve a 2nd-story addition or significant change to the primary facade. And this map reflects the resources the city currently has identified, and those are noted in green, and in purple you can see our actual properties that are within our 2 historic districts. So actually the city doesn't have a very big choice on this part, because state law dictates under CEQA that when you demolish a historic resource that you have to go through a discretionary process. So to determine if it is a historic resource, we would have a historic significance report required depending on the nature of the change. And that would typically could involve buildings over 50 years old. So what are the benefits of the citywide design guidelines? Well, we think they provide greater clarity, increased predictability, more efficient review, more sensitive to context and particular development types, maintains property investment by preventing inappropriate development, and it's an educational resource. In our land use code summaries includes, as I'd mentioned earlier, we're going to be streamlining to not require ADUs in historic districts, have a review process by the historic committee that would be approved by staff. We've clarified that the projects which are subject to minor design review to include construction of 1 single-family dwelling or a new 2nd-story addition or significant change to the primary facade within Character Area 1. We specified that for projects within the HD overlay that they are to be consistent with Chapter 8 historic resources. We've included additional criteria for projects within an HD overlay to require approval by the historic committee when there's a 2nd story or a significant change to the primary facade when it's not consistent with the guidelines. We've also amended accessory structures section of the code to require all accessory structures be consistent with the design guidelines, and require new structures for visitor lodging purposes have major design review approval by the Planning Commission. specifying that all signs must be consistent with the citywide design guidelines, and requiring that new wireless telecommunication facilities be consistent with the design guidelines. And as we wind up post-adoption, our plan is to continue the public engagement and education process through implementing the design guidelines. Just because you adopt the document doesn't mean that stops. We have plans to develop new brochures, create information which is downloadable from our city website, and we have plans to continue to do outreach in the community through educational workshops and presentations. And there's my contact information for anyone that would like that. And there's the summary of the recommended action for you for your consideration. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director DeRosa. So at this point, I would ask my council members to ask clarifying questions or informational questions, but we do want to open this up to the public. So if you have any questions now, I'd like to recognize you to ask a question. McCaffrey.
Yes, Director DeRosa, thank you for that nice presentation. It's great to see that this is finally moving along to the public hearing phase. It's been a long process. I just wanted clarification on one thing. On page 184, it talks about demolition or significant alteration of a structure on the above list over 50 years old may require the preparation of a historic structure report by a qualified architectural historian. And I've spoken with some members of the public who were, what they gathered from that, and maybe they didn't read the whole thing, but that anything built in 1968 or earlier would require a historian. I was wondering if you could maybe clarify that a little bit and the actual limits of what that is in the various districts.
Yeah, sure, I'd happy to. That's a great question. And yeah, historic properties, there's a lot of, sometimes people don't understand what qualifies as historic or not. One thing I will say that is the city actually has, we've collected a number of historic surveys on file, and we've actually identified certain properties that are contributing or not. And so that actually is a step forward. So if somebody actually has one of these properties that's, let's say it's outside of a district, but is 50 years or older and is on a list that we've already had the survey work done, that is a significant step because we can already identify that it is a historic resource. So therefore they don't have to pay to have an additional, especially if it's being demolished. There is, and this is something that's not a change as a result of this project. Once it's determined as a historic resource, our zoning code actually dictates through our historic demolition permit process what the requirements are. And so they may have to talk about the economic cost versus value to save it versus to demolish it. And there's a variety of things that are already part of our zoning process. So I would like to just make it clear on the record that just if somebody has a house that's over 50 years old, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have to go out and get an architectural historian to do anything, because we have a significant resource list, which is a big head start to identifying if it's a historic resource or not.
So how would someone know or find out if their house was a historic resource or was part of one of these surveys?
So yeah, so as it mentions in the document, we have we basically will eventually be putting this online. It's in an Excel spreadsheet, and so they could make an inquiry through the planning department, and we can verify that. Some of the surveys are, I would say, over 15 years old, so we would have to probably go and do a field check to make sure nothing significant has changed on the exterior. And, we don't regulate anything related to people demolishing the insides of their houses. This is really only applies to making a significant change, like a significant alteration or a complete demolition of the house.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Councilman Niokas?
Yes. Thanks for compliments on the work. It's really going from a black and white to color, literally, way of looking at these things. A few questions. First of all, I think I think there were some concerns shared on the Planning Commission about the risk of being too prescriptive, especially like in the character area one, right, where really the nuances of that character area are the fact that it's so diverse. that has such a wide variety of building types, and to start saying, well, we're going to kind of hold you to some kind of guideline in the form of the design review seems kind of contradictory. And I guess it really kind of comes down to the overall question of, when we're making these decisions, right? It's always that magic balance between, not doing enough and doing too much.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe can you address that question about where do you think these design guidelines fall into that range, specifically with, the question of diversity in our different character areas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I really love about the community outreach process is, especially at the August open house, we received a lot of feedback. And actually, it was interesting for me to have the conversations with people because, I'd have one conversation with people that said, well, we should be able to build a contemporary house wherever I want. And then on the other side of the room, there'd be somebody that would say, I'm terrified about any more teardowns, and what can we do to make sure that, there's eyes on this and that what's being built is appropriate in scale. So at the end of that open house, where we really got the most rich feedback from the community, when we distilled all those comments down, because really this is the best way policy is made. It's not at the staff level. It's through doing the community outreach and being weighed in by elected officials and planning commissioners. And the feedback we got from that workshop was pretty clearly that most of the comments about really wanting to preserve and maintain character, the majority of the people that were making those comments were in character area 1. And so we thought, I ran by the planning commission, well, how about a compromise that if someone, because I was actually talking to a designer that says, well, I get a lot of people that want to build a very contemporary home. I'm concerned these design guidelines won't allow me to do that. And so the compromise was that, the design guidelines are, especially with them being advisory outside of character 1, there still is that flexibility to allow that creativity and that diversity that kind of defines Healdsburg in the other areas. So that was where we figured we had come to a nice balance to, really piece the people that identify with that unique character that is the traditional, iconic downtown neighborhood, and make sure that that's maintained for future generations.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Another question I have is about affordability. So I know that one of the it was actually a beautiful moment listening to the minutes, or watching the minutes of the January 23rd presentation, when a member of our housing committee stepped up and said, I have a concern about this, how this might affect how some of the two-story requirements might affect how affordable, how we can get that high density that we need in order to have some sort of semblance of affordability here. Can you speak to a little bit more about that? Can you expand on how the design guidelines, how they impact the development of affordable housing in town?
Yeah, we actually had a great discussion with that with one of our stakeholders, Brett Jones, who's an architect for David Baker Architects in San Francisco. And he very articulately told us how he actually, in his experience, they build a lot of affordable housing in downtown San Francisco. And you can actually execute really good design without, it doesn't have to cost a lot. And one area that we pulled back on our design guidelines, we used to have a matrix in there that really said you have to use these materials in these areas that to some people may come across as maybe raising the cost of how they would build their house or change their pro forma. So after getting a lot of input from our stakeholders, we actually took that materials matrix out that said you shall use these materials in certain areas, and really left it up in the spirit of having a more creative and flexible document. We wanted to let each applicant dictate what they wanted to accomplish through the design and the materials, as long as they're consistent with the vocabulary of other buildings that are in that area. We could support that. So we don't think it's limiting at all, and that's not very typical that you actually have design guidelines that truly focus on affordability, but we did have that in the back of our mind.
And then my third and final question is about, going back to my original comment that, that really does represent a big change, right? In the software development world, when something like this happens, it's going from a version 1.0 to version 2.0. And when you make that big of a change, invariably you're going to have, well, oosh, I didn't foresee that. So there's always that kind of like, release 2.1 that kind of makes some adjustments and tweaks to the based on the experience of that release in the field. How do you anticipate incorporating what? Do you foresee that kind of those adjustments happening? How do you see those adjustments being made? When would be an appropriate time to kind of revisit that? And what support would you need from us to do that?
Thank you. That's a great question. So one thing that is, we aspire to do, especially when we start with a new initiatives, or this is, like you said, a pretty robust update, that, at the end of the year, we could pick a handful of projects that are building permits and major design reviews and go out and hopefully look at them after they're built and see, did these really execute what our intent was that we were looking for? And especially in the areas where the design guidelines are advisory and not mandatory, if we're finding that, we're getting complaints from people or privacy concerns are not being respected, that's another opportunity that we can look at things. But again, that would require funding and going out and doing more community outreach, because we'd want to make sure we set the policy right. But we do definitely want to have a check-in probably at the end of each year and see how we're doing and how's the process working. And I think David actually had mentioned about doing surveys, starting with our development process, and that could be something that we survey people about.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, and I believe everyone up here is satisfied with questions. So at this point, I'd like to open to this public hearing to the public comment portion. So is there anyone that would like to speak regarding this process of the adoption of these citywide design guidelines for the land use code? So could you raise your hand if you're planning to talk about this, just so I can get a feeling for what's going on? Okay, one person, two people maybe? Okay, great, welcome, come on up. Please state your name, make sure the mic's on. Thank you so much.
Hi, it's Deborah Kravitz. First, I want to thank the planning director for being receptive to the comments I made at the Planning Commission. And I believe some of those comments are reflected in the errata that you should have to the second draft. In addition to those, I had a couple of very minor tweaks I wanted to add for your consideration. The first one is on page 7 of the design guidelines. There's a list of relevant policy documents that the design guidelines are a part of and parcel of in terms of building in Healdsburg. But missing from that list was the HAP. And I thought it was important that that be considered an important document when people are talking about building in Healdsburg. The second one is a related comment. I would request that on page 9, there's a further edit to reflect that the HAP as amended was readopted by the council in 2018. The current version of the document only has a reference to the original HAP or the last HAP in 2016. So that could be brought up to date. The third minor tweak that I would request would go on a caption. I think it's on picture number 2 on page 39. And I would replace the language there with language that reads, a pattern of 1 to 2 story buildings is common and should be reflected in new construction to capture the increased flexibility to build higher density units in character area 2. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Tim Unger, Plaza Street. With respect to the B slide on page 8 of Director DeRosa's presentation, where it says strengthen the guidance for solar technology in both residential and non-residential areas, I'm curious specifically, what does that really mean? And as an example, I understand there are now new racking requirements which are beyond the scope of what manufacturers recommend as being necessary to trigger warranties for solar racking requirements, and that's going to add additional cost to installation and may impede an individual's ability, particularly on the residential side, to make the decision to spend the money to have the installation done. And with us wanting to continue to become more sustainable, that seems to be counterintuitive. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else wishing to speak about the design guidelines? Okay.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Oh, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Clearly passes. Okay. So we're closing the public hearing aspect of the design guidelines and we're back to the council now. Does anyone have anything that they want to add or any questions? Oh, okay. Staff, do you have any questions you want to answer that were posed by our public comment? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Relating to Ms. Deborah Kravitz, I actually have corresponded with her with those communications she shared with you, and I'm fine making those changes. So if we could let the record reflect, I asked her to read those into the record. That the staff is in agreement with those. And then in relation to Mr. Unger's questions and concerns about the solar technology, we'll be sure to consult with our building department, who actually is keeping up to speed on the most of the solar technology advances before we make any specific recommendations, and we'll have the costs involved, the cost considerations included in that decision making.
Thank you, Director. And again, thanks for all the work. This has been an amazing process. And I know when I came onto council, Director Nelson was going forward on this, and it's just been such a process. I just want to thank you so much for being a part of this and being such a great resource for our city, and also just presenting as you have tonight in a clear way what's going on. So thank you. So does anyone have anything they want to add or comment on as far as this? And this is a first reading. So Councilwoman Gold.
I really like the document. I feel like we discussed it pretty thoroughly at the Planning Commission, the Joint Planning Commission meeting. I'm quite content with the changes that have been made, and I'm perfectly willing to move forward with the resolution of adoption.
I am as well, and I'd like to echo Councilmember Neokis's comments about the being relevant to like a software release. I mean, I think this is a large improvement over the document that was guiding us up to this point that was written in the 90s, and it looks like we'll have a lot of opportunities to have further revisions to it. And I just want to thank the planning staff and all the people in the public and the council and the planning commission for all their work on this, and our consultant that's there in Colorado. I think it's great, and I favor adoption.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with the aforementioned sentiments. I think this it's a solid document. It's a really big change. So I'll just reinforce my sentiment that, I'd like to see a review, and maybe this is one of those things that we can talk about in our 2019 goals when it comes time, that maybe we have a look and see how that fits into the staff priorities at that time, to kind of do another kind of 2.1. And I think with that, really that's my biggest concern. Aside from that, I think this is great. I'm ready to move forward.
Mayor Higley.
Yeah, I agree with everybody that, first, thank you for, putting this together, and thanks to everybody that helped out. The one thing I did want to comment on is I brought this to the local realtor meeting last Thursday, just say, hey, just take a quick look, does anything pop up? And part of the reason I did that was word is getting out to people looking in Healdsburg, whether to live here or whatever, that, hey, there's a design guideline, double check what you can do. And I think part of the issue that we've had in the past is there's a disconnect between the real estate community and our planning department, where, it's not good for anybody if, as a realtor, you're selling a house. Oh yeah, you'll be able to do this. And then your client buys it, and then turns out they can't. Doesn't look good for anybody. So having something like this with some of the specific guidelines and outlining this works, this doesn't, does a lot of pre-filtering, which I think in the long term is what we want, and I think it ultimately helps guide that decision and create eliminate some of the confusion or miscommunication. So I do like this document and the detail and breaking out into the different design areas so that people know what they're getting into up front. I do agree. I think it's good to periodically check in on some of these things for 2.1, and I would hope that as things pop up that those are noted and we can come back and make some improvements. But I think this is a great document. Thank you very much.
And I would just add, what I really appreciated on this whole process is understanding character and looking at a map and looking at our city and looking at the boundaries of our city and understanding that there are different neighborhoods and there are different places that we have an understanding of what we want there and what we don't. And I say that we because really our planning commission is the one who gets to implement this along with the trust we have as our building director and planning director. So I'm really excited, as everyone's saying, to apply these. I really like the recognition that there are different areas, and I appreciate all the public vetting of it, and I just really want to thank you for your willingness. This is really huge for the city, and I think it promotes I think this actually provides a lot of flexibility. People are thinking it's so rigid. It's not. In fact, I talked to a few architects about it this week, and I read through it, and I don't think it's prohibitive as much as it's promoting imagination and different ways to look at character, and so I'm very happy to support it as well. So let's move forward with possibly a motion here.
Yes, I'll offer a resolution of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg adopting the citywide design guidelines, including the minor revisions that were read into the record this evening.
Second.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Leokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
Yes. And thank you again, Director DeRosa, for all of the time and energy and follow through on this one. Oh, we have one more.
I'll offer for first reading an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg amending the Healdsburg Municipal Code Title 20 for consistency with the citywide design guidelines. This is for first reading only.
And that was by title
Title
only.
only is what I meant to say, of course.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Leokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
Yes.
That's it.
Okay, so three.
Mayor Mansell, if I could just take a second,
Yes.
I think it's important to acknowledge the fine work that Director DeRosa has done, but also to recognize the work the previous director, Ms. Nelson, did. This started back in 2016. Of course, she's moved on, but I think this really is a 2-year process. Recognizing those two for the excellent work they've done to move this forward, I think is appreciative to everybody. Thank you very much for doing that.
And thank you for being here tonight. And now we're moving to another item that will be having you right there as well, right, Director DeRosa? All right, so we're moving on to an item that we've all been waiting for. It's old business. And I know that it's, I think most people that are here, because I only heard from 2 people from the last one, are here to speak about this one, or at least to hear about it live. It's an old business item called the conditional use permits for hotels downtown. So this evening, we're going to receive a report and provide direction to staff. And I just want to thank you again for doing all this tonight. This is your night. So thank you, Director. Again now.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's move to conditional use permits for hotels. And again, the recommended action today will be to receive the report and provide direction to staff. And this project also recently came to the City Council on December 4th of 2017. We presented a discussion of the land use control offered by a CUP and how hotel development may be further regulated. And at that meeting, Council directed staff to further study the ramifications of limiting hotel development downtown. We also shared this map in December, which notes in green. For those of you that can't see the legend, the green is the hotels, and the boundary that you see there represents what we call our downtown core. The little, let's see, red asterisks are the vacation rentals, and the little outline of the houses are our B&Bs or residential visitor lodging. And so you can see in summary here, we have 12 hotels. As of today, currently 3 residential visitor lodging and 4 vacation rentals. And here is the zoning map that goes along with that. And so you can see the downtown is broken down into a variety of core commercial zones. Hotels are allowed by right in the downtown CD and PR districts. And then hotels are currently not allowed in the CS district, which is these purple area up here. And also refreshing on that discussion in December, we talked a little bit about what a CUP does and does not do. What does it do? It allows for staff to consider the proposal, evaluate the compatibility of surrounding land uses. It allows for staff to establish conditions of approval, which would minimize the operational impacts of the use. It allows for the use entitlement to be revoked should the use not be maintained and operated as conditioned. It requires that all CUPs must have findings made as part of the staff report analysis to determine if there are any public health, safety, or welfare impacts from the operation. What does it not do? It does not regulate the exterior design. It does not regulate lot coverage or zoning development standards. And it would not automatically prohibit certain land uses, such as hotels. And just also to refresh, what is the CUP process when somebody comes in today with an application? So they file their request and a fee with the planning department. We review it to determine if the proposal is appropriate for the proposed location and compatible. We prepare a report and make a recommendation of approval or denial to the planning commission based on the findings in the land use code. And those findings relate to consistency with the general plan, the zoning, and if it would have any health, safety, welfare impacts. We also publish a legal notice of hearing published in the paper. There's a sign posted on the property, and we also notify all the property owners within 300 feet. That's 10 days prior to the hearing. And the Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for CUPs, but that decision may be appealed to the council within 10 days. Regulating hotels downtown. So our general plan is our guiding land use policy document. Related to the discussion in focusing on the downtown, the relevant land use designation is downtown commercial. And essentially what that policy intent is to encourage a mix of uses, including both commercial and residential. And then I listed below 3 policies related to commercial uses. And these are citywide, but EDA3 provides for the continuation expansion of Healdsburg's commercial services to meet the needs of both Healdsburg area residents and visitors. EDA4 encourage businesses that generate revenues such as transit occupancy tax and sales tax, in addition to property taxes, in order to support city services. And then EDB2 seek to provide a diversity of uses within the downtown that serve both residents and visitors and avoid over-concentration of a single type of use. So what is our current approval process for hotels downtown? So we have existing buildings, and in that case, it would not trigger any discretionary review. It would just be a building permit for a change of use if it's not a hotel currently. A building permit is typically routed to all city departments for review and comment, and then improvements and requirements are communicated to the applicant through that process. It's a different process when it is new construction. It requires a lot more staff time, takes more coordination because it is a major design review approval by the Planning Commission. As we review that project description, we would identify conditions of approval that would be required to address any design-related issues. The hotel developers are required to fully park the project on site. It also may require a traffic study, and of course, CEQA would apply. So this is a list that's also in the staff report of various options and ways that we can regulate and restrict future hotels downtown. I'm going to jump ahead to this matrix because I think this would make a better conversation to talk about the mechanism and the benefits and the negative consequences of each of these options. So the first limiting mechanism that we thought of is, obviously what we've been talking about. So if we required a CUP for hotels in the PR and the CD zones, the key benefit is that, it obviously allows the city to weigh in and condition on the development to ensure that the operational characteristics do not create impacts to the surrounding area. The negative consequences are that's, additional time and cost to the applicant to pay for that additional CUP application and additional staff time to process. Another limiting mechanism is limiting the number of keys for new hotels to no more than a determined number. So the benefit is that would prevent larger type hotels and limit new hotels to the smaller type like boutiques and B&Bs. It would potentially exclude many hotel developers from building due to a minimized investment return potential. On the negative side, it would continue the trend of unaffordable type of hotels in Healdsburg if having a diverse type of hotel base is important. There's also prohibiting hotels with more than a determined number of keys from expanding. Again, that would limit larger type hotels and allows for non-hotel uses in the downtown to grow. Negative consequences for the city is it would limit our TOT revenue. And then there's also prohibiting hotels in the PR and, so excuse me, we already did that one. Move on to the next one. Actually, this one is where we would actually prohibit them, excuse me. And so that's where we would say they're not allowed at all as a permitted use. So removing that as a permitted use from the land use code would allow more potential services to benefit the residents. And again, that would limit TOT revenue. Another limiting mechanism we thought of is requiring buffers to have separation zones between hotels in the downtown. So that immediately would prevent an over-concentration of use, and it would allow for other land uses to come in. The negative consequences are, depending on the buffer zone, it may prevent any additional hotel development. Another limiting mechanism we considered was requiring new hotels to pay workforce housing fee via an inclusionary hotel ordinance. The benefits of that is it would help create specific funding mechanism to address the shortage of housing and mitigate hotel housing impacts. It may deter some hotels from developing and may help speed up the construction and delivery of workforce housing. On the negative consequences, that's going to add cost to the developer. And then our last criteria that we thought would be a potential limiting mechanism is to not allow for weddings or special events within new hotels, because we know that those do impact parking and traffic downtown. So that would be the primary benefit that we could see from implementing that. The negative consequences, it may not be a huge limiting factor for future hotel development. Other criteria is in the PR zone, require retail on the first floor where there is street frontage or locate the hotel above the first floor. So the benefit of that is it would maintain the zoning district objectives to have ground floor uses primarily for pedestrian shopping activities, and the logistics of a retail element would help limit hotel. We didn't see any particular negative consequences of that. And then the last limiting mechanism was require new hotels to construct workforce housing via an inclusionary hotel ordinance. And the benefit of that is it would help address the shortage of housing and mitigate hotel housing impacts. Would again deter some hotels from developing and help speed up the construction delivery of workforce housing. And on the negative consequences, again, that would add to developer project costs. So with some of the things that we've talked about tonight, how would these measures limit to limit hotels be implemented. So the City Council would direct staff to amend the land use code, which would be presented to the Planning Commission in a public hearing. Findings of consistency with the general plan would be made. And if approved by the Planning Commission, the code amendments would be forwarded to the Council for consideration and approval in a public hearing. And I believe at the December workshop, there was a mention of what design controls are in place to regulate the height and bulk of new hotels. Well, height is generally regulated through our zoning code, and so those regulations are in place, and our citywide design guidelines will help with the bulk and the massing. So in summary, we have 4 alternatives options to discuss tonight. One would be to continue the discussion of the council to the council's upcoming goal session on March 26th. Another option would be to make no additional changes to the land use code and leave things status quo. The third one would be direct staff to amend the land use code requiring new hotels in the CD and PR districts to have a CUP and potentially other limiting criteria. And the last option, direct staff to provide additional information on how to implement the limiting mechanisms identified in the staff report in this presentation. And this wraps up my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director DeRosa. Okay, this is a long-awaited issue. We have a packed house. We've been in here for an hour, so I really would like to make sure we're just asking succinct questions here so we can open it to the public because they've been waiting. So we'll start with questions, yeah. So who would like to ask a question to Director?
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Okay, go first.
So first, would you please define buffer zone? Are you referring to, in other words, saying that you can't build a hotel within a certain number of feet of an existing hotel?
Exactly.
It seems like it would pretty much, considering how tight the downtown area is, how small it is, unless you're saying, 50 feet, it's pretty much going to have the effect of eliminating hotels, the buffer zone, downtown.
Other communities have, when there's a concern of a proliferation of uses in a certain geographical area, buffers are something that, they look at. But yes, we would have to rein that in, and we have GIS capabilities so we can go out a certain number of feet and look at the logistics of what that would potentially look like. So it's just an option to explore.
And could you maybe clarify what defines a hotel? Because I know that other kinds of overnight visitor lodgings are permitted in the downtown district by right, as well as hotels. So we have little, 1, 2 unit places scattered around downtown. So at what point does it stop being just overnight visitor lodging and become a hotel?
Yeah, the key distinction is you typically have staffing in various forms of on-site staffing that take care of the maintenance, the hotel check-in, the house cleaning, and those are all employees of that particular venue.
So that's the distinction, on-site staffing?
Primarily, yes.
Thank you.
Councilman Neokis?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question is about the CUP process itself. So maybe might be helpful for me, maybe probably for the audience too, to maybe paint a picture of how a CUP process would ensue for for a proposed hotel.
So, really, to have good outcomes with a conditional use permit, it's really dependent on asking the right questions and having a really good, well-defined project description, because you can't condition what you don't know or understand, right? So one of the things that came out of our alcohol ordinance, for example, is that now we have a much more detailed supplemental questionnaire, so we understand what are the potential impacts that we know related to this use, and what are specific questions we're going to ask them. Like if we're talking about alcohol, we know that sometimes there's events. So with hotels, a parallel thing that I could see us doing is through a CUP application, they would need to talk about, so some of the things that really create impacts are, okay, how many employees do you anticipate having? Are you going to, excuse me. Are you going to have valet parking? How do you plan to park on the site? What are your hours of operation? And so really asking the deeper questions. So because it's really, there's the design review part, which is still goes forward like we do now, but the conditional use permit part would say what are some of the potential concerns of how this is operating and how could it impact adjacent uses? Because those are where we tend to get most of the complaints of, overflow of things. And so it would just be primarily it would be upfront asking more clarifying questions, a more robust project description. And then we would still do what we do currently, which is review a project for completeness within 30 days, give comments back to the applicant. So in most cases, assuming this would be a new hotel, in parallel, they probably would be submitting a design review application along with a conditional use permit application. The design review would look at more the external features. The conditional use permit would say, what are the things that we need to be concerned about? And there's also, the deliveries, right? Those are things. Where are people going to park when they need to come in and stage things? And like I think I'd mentioned in the December workshop with the 110 Dry Creek project, even though that's not in the downtown, we had a concern about how if they were able to offer weddings there, how that would have completely thrown off the parking balance because they were barely parked as it was. So we had to, by default, say, well, one of the things on the table is we're going to have to strike off your floor plan this area, this reception area, because we knew of the impact it was going to have. So, it requires a thoughtful process on the part of the planner to, help the applicant have a viable project if it looks like it's a good fit. But at the same time say, these are some things that we're not going to give on that you're going to either have to change about your project or, we're going to not be able to recommend approval.
Gotcha. So really for a hotel, it sounds like what you're saying is you would need to come up with a hotel-specific supplemental questionnaire in addition to the basic CUP questionnaire that we have on file for generic projects, right?
That's what I would recommend, or at least have more clarifying questions as it relates because of the unique nature of how the impacts could be in a downtown area.
Right. And how would you go about coming up with, what would be the process for coming up with that supplemental questionnaire?
It'd be very similar to what we did with the alcohol ordinance, where we knew that there were certain things that the community was concerned about related to these uses. And so we just need to know, if it's events, how many hours of operation, but they're not an applicant's not necessarily going to just give you that information unless you ask for it. And therefore you can, then you kind of start a negotiation process. You look at what they want to do and say, that's a little too much for this area. And you need to, you work on a compromise where you can ratchet down, or if, their business plan, it's not a good fit, then you can recommend that they may look elsewhere to build their project.
Right.
So it's kind of having some frank conversations.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess where I'm going with this is, when we look at impacts of a hotel, some of the very concrete, specific examples that you gave are obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Parking, deliveries, those kinds of logistical, quantifiable, right, impacts.
Mm-hmm.
What I think a lot of us are concerned about are those maybe not so easily quantifiable impacts, that more of the qualitative impacts. So, how do we even begin to address those impacts in a reasonable way that's fair in a questionnaire, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I hear where you're going, like how we don't really know directly how this is going to impact future retail uses or diversity of retail uses if we let this one hotel go in. But I think, there's a way where we can track, have a database where we know, okay, we have this many hotels, we have a map, and we know how many, we know where all our alcohol tasting rooms are now. We can look at other specialty retailers and, I think just having an awareness of what you have in terms of diversity is an important first step.
Thank you.
Okay, so are there any other questions from the council? Okay, I really would like to open this up to public comment, so I thank everybody for that. I would like to ask how many of you are planning to speak on this item, so we just get an idea of how many people are planning. I mean, you could change your mind, but just to get an idea. Okay, so I'd like to open this up. I think we have at least a good hour of public comment, so I'm going to stick to the 3-minute rule, if we would please. And I would like to invite anyone that would like to speak to come forward. And same idea of coming up, saying your name and your address, and just welcome your public comment. Thank you all for being here. So welcome.
Hi, my name is Bruce Abramson here in Healdsburg. Mayor and council members, our group, Residents for Balance Downtown, has one goal before you, and that goal is to protect and preserve our downtown and plaza. We have a modest proposal. It is to restrict any future hotel growth in the downtown and plaza districts. This is a 4-block by 3-block area that is heavily used by residents. It does not cover the rest of the city. We believe we have the overwhelming support of residents for this proposal. We believe it would pass if ever put to a vote of the residents. This is our opinion. So what is the problem? Why are we seeking this change? The downtown has built up to a large total of 181 tourist rooms and 12 hotels over the past years. There continues to be pressure to put in more hotels. Citywide, there are 425 tourist rooms in planning and construction, with a total of 856 hotel rooms projected citywide in coming years. We believe we've reached a tipping point, an overbalance and overconcentration of hotels downtown. Our entryway into downtown Healdsburg is lined with hotels that represent over 130 rooms. There are 4 hotels in a 2-block stretch: Hotel Healdsburg, H3, H2, and potentially Replay Hotel. We have 2 hotels in the plaza. Should we allow additional hotels on the remaining 2 sides of our plaza? Where is the planning? Where is the vision to protect and preserve our downtown? More hotels downtown will exacerbate quality of life issues, more traffic, more congestion, backups, parking, and livability. Our latest hotel example, Single Thread, has $700 to $1,000 per night rooms and a ground floor restaurant with $300 dinner tabs. Will this be an example for other future hotels downtown? Will these prices help local residents to engage and purchase goods and services? I don't think so. The bottom line is, the downtown is the residents' living room for many events and meeting each other. It provides a sense of identity and a sense of place for many residents. We cherish the downtown. More tourist bedrooms would dilute the quality of life and engagement for local residents. Tourist beds will take up valuable land and space that might otherwise be used for a range of shops and businesses that serve everyone and not just the wealthy few. Who ever heard of the proposition that more hotels downtown will enhance the small town character and charm of Healdsburg? I don't think so. We have provided the City Council with 6 general plan policies I provided here that are consistent and support our modest proposal. They cover guiding principles, economic development, and land use policy. The key values cover for the downtown are summarized as diversity of uses, avoiding an overconcentration, balance resident and visitor needs, protect and enhance Healdsburg's small town character. For some reason, unknown reason, city staff did not cover these policies or the factual data to back them up, and we wonder why. We feel the staff report leans heavily towards no change or CUPs. Lastly, the current land use policy continues to exacerbate this rush to have more hotels downtown. There are 2 potential sites on Healdsburg Avenue where the owners have expressed interest in developing hotels. There are at least 3 other sites downtown that could have a hotel if the owners decided to sell. So I ask, when is enough? When is enough enough? We call on you to take action. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, welcome. Our second speaker, and I did let that go over. I felt really bad, but there's a context. Go.
Okay, very good. Ted Calvert, Healdsburg. I was just curious. It says that it's a 4-floor height, and I think of the complex that's just being built on Dry Creek, by Dry Creek and Grove, and move that height over to where the Mill District is going to be, and I can see some great shadows being cast from the sun coming from the east, and it seems like it's very, very high for a small town, 4 stories, and that complex there on Drive Creek Road seemed like it's almost 5 stories high. And I understand it's going to be sort of back toward the railroad tracks, but still, some of the stores in front of it and buildings are going to be in the shadow, and as the season goes, the shadow moves, so on and so forth. So I'd just like it to, if it could be brought down to 3 floors, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Chris Herod. This debate is not about whether there should be more hotels in Healdsburg, because plenty more hotels are already coming. This debate is about impacts and unintended consequences. The difficult fact we must accept is that we are in the dark about how all these new rooms downtown and elsewhere will affect livability and business in town. We don't know if more hotels will increase or decrease our ability to market Healdsburg as a getaway from crowded city life. Both tourism and locals' interests are at stake. If we want to be empirical, if we want to lean on the facts, and if we do not want to make irreversible mistakes, then we need to find a way to effectively safeguard our iconic downtown while we find out what will happen after this new wave of hotels is built. Protecting the downtown area during the upcoming period of growth reflects our town's core values and is supported by numerous points in the general plan. It represents the values of thoughtful planners, of residents, and of business people who want Healdsburg to move forward intelligently, not just haphazardly following an open-ended enthusiasm for more growth. A modest change to the zoning, limiting new hotels downtown, can help accomplish this protection. I know some of you are entertaining the CUP option as the method best suited to accomplish this. To you, I offer 2 related questions that I hope you can address tonight. Number 1, is a concern for maintaining retail balance at a downtown that serves both local and tourist interests the reason why CUPs should be adopted? Are CUPs a stronger tool for helping to achieve this rather than limiting new hotels downtown altogether? Or is it weaker? Number 2, will CUPs consistently safeguard our downtown against the potentially aggressive legal tactics of developers whose interests outweigh the legitimate needs of our town? Do they leave a window of opportunity for inappropriate projects where there should be no window? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, is anyone, all those hands that raised, anyone else want to go? Welcome. Whoever wants to come up, we're ready for you. Thank you.
Hello. I'm going to be brief, I think. I think I'm losing my voice, so I hope it's okay if I speak less than 3 minutes. Okay. I believe all of you are interested in what citizens want you to do. Letters, emails, conversations, and hearings like this only give you a small sample of voices. But thanks for putting on the agenda tonight. I think we need a larger public opinion sample on issues that keep coming up, like this, the impacts of hotel expansion. This issue is a big deal to some of us. No one is asking you to walk precincts to get public opinion, but I understand that a city survey may be going out that includes questions regarding hotels, tourism, livability. I hope that's correct. I'm concerned about the direction of the livability here. Maybe hotel expansion does diminish the livability of our small town. How? I've listed some possibilities. By limiting downtown business diversity, by leading to more second home purchases, which reduces our moderate and affordable housing stock, by escalating downtown real estate prices, by replacing local families and school-aged children downtown, by increasing the prices and supply of everyday needs, by encouraging unwanted short-term home rentals, by affecting the visitor to locals ratio, by adding more cars circling the Plaza Park, by increasing our party town drinking atmosphere, by creating an over-concentration hotel alley look, and by multiplying the year-round population downtown. So I hope the council does address some of these possible impacts. Lots of good suggestions were given, and that it acts tonight, hopefully, to limit hotel expansion downtown. Healdsburg residents and voters are doing more than our share to accommodate increasing tourism. We are out of balance. Our downtown and neighborhoods are becoming less livable. Why would we want that to happen?
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Jim Winston, Healdsburg. I'm going to keep this real brief because I think that you know what's at issue. You've heard it, when you've been out walking and meeting people on the street and going to different affairs and fundraisers and kind of talking to the people that actually live here, and you get a sense of what they want and what their thoughts are. So I don't think I need to go back and revisit that and give you some concrete reasons why I'm saying what I am saying. So I'll keep it real brief. As citizens, we feel overrun by hotels and tourism. I hear that all the time. And we need to stop the bleeding. And you know what I mean by that. We're losing our small town character. The reasons why we're here, we're turning into a Carmel. I mean, I'm waiting for an aerial tramway. It's crazy. Who do we want to be? And we can do this before it's too late. We are losing our identity, and it really bothers me a lot. Thank you.
Okay, someone else out there in this huge crowd? Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Robert News, resident of Healdsburg. I just wanted to point out that an already pending expansion of hotels is removing from the plaza, expected to, Copperfields, fabrication stores, One World store, and I believe also the kitchenware store, which are four of, I think, probably, say the 6 or 7 retailers that are most of benefit, most used by local residents. 4 of, I think, the top 6 or the top 7, all expected to disappear shortly. And that's the trend. Thanks very much. Please limit future hotels.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? It'd be nice to hear someone support not doing this, just so we can get some debate going, democracy. So, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim Hyde, Johnson Street. Just a couple of thoughts. Yes, I do not support a universal arbitrary closure of hotels downtown. I think that would be naive and incredibly not very well thought out. There's a couple of things. I think there's a naivete that's being expressed about the economics, that if we ban hotels, all the things that we want to get built downtown will get built. And it doesn't work that way. The land economics downtown are such that things that people want, the retail rents cannot support the cost to build new buildings. The way retail works is it gets subsidized by other uses that sit over on top of it. So a good use would be residential, but our growth management ordinance limits the number of allocations that makes it possible to get enough units to reach the density that supports the land cost. Hotels, alternatively, much like the Hotel Healdsburg, provide the number of units that support the retail underneath and make for an active streetscape, provide a great little pizza shop on the corner, and the kinds of things that make this a great town. So the notion that if we stop building hotels, the socks store, the Scotch tape boutique will suddenly show up and fill in those blank spots will not occur. We'll continue to have empty spaces downtown. Now, some people say that's fine, and maybe it is, but I think it's foolish to think We should build more hotels on the outskirts of town and then complain about new hotels downtown driving increased parking and traffic. That seems counterintuitive. If people are down here visiting and walking, then they're parked once and the hotels have to park themselves. Then why would that not be a good thing versus having people out on Drive Creek having to drive into town and compete for the limited parking spaces? The other thing, there's been a number of people that said, universally or almost everybody in town is opposed to tourism and doesn't want more hotels. I don't think that's a balanced viewpoint. The people I talk to love the tourism. I love the tourists. I think they bring diversity. They bring interesting, new, fresh ideas. They bring exciting places and to eat. Many of the restaurants, if you talk to the people that have businesses here, they would not support themselves just on locals. But most of the people that feel that way can't come to these meetings. They're home raising families. They're working on businesses that they're building that actually are benefiting from the tourists that come into town. And they have too busy a life to come and spend a couple hours here in the evening. So I would encourage you to try, to one of the speakers' point about how do you reach out, I would encourage you to try and get the input from the kind of the silent majority that's out there that's actually working every day and trying to raise their families and actually benefits from all the great things that have happened in town. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us another perspective on this. All right. And I'm going to ask the council in this chambers that we're respectful. And I understand there's a lot of emotion, but I really hope that we can be civil and show up as people that can convey ideas and be respectful. So I really would encourage everyone to check themselves and be aware of the fact that people have a right to say what they want to say. This is still happening here. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Vesna Breznikar. I've lived here for 25 years and I've seen a lot of growth in this town. And sure, we're very successful right now. So aren't we successful enough? The people that are here making a living, as the previous speaker said, they're making a living. So what more do we need to add to this picture? I think we've reached a good place where everyone's doing well. I don't think stopping hotels is going to create a catastrophe here. We're doing well. And I think it can impact the locals. And I can tell you, I know hundreds and hundreds of people here. They're all overwhelmed by the tourism. And we don't feel like it's our town. We just avoid going downtown during the weekend. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming up. Anyone else like to speak this evening on this issue? So I just want to make the note that we're going to close the public comment if you don't come up. So please feel free. All right. Welcome. Thank you.
Mayor Mansell and council members, Alan Cohen, live on Center Street. I would reiterate a couple of points that Jim made. I'm not sure that limiting hotels is going to limit tourists. I think if they're not built downtown, they'll be built on the outskirts. They'll be built outside of town. And then people will drive and exacerbate the parking downtown. We now require that everyone, any hotel downtown, provides parking for itself. I don't think there's a whole lot of sites that can accommodate new hotels, but they have to park on site. That means people come, they park, and they walk. If they stay at rooms on the outskirts of town, they're going to drive into town, and as was mentioned, circle around the plaza, look for parking spaces, take up those parking spaces. One of the points in the staff report was that the idea of requiring ground floor retail. I think that actually is in the zoning code. Certainly in the design guidelines, and I think the Hotel Healdsburg is a perfect example of that. Absolutely, that should be the case. You want to have at the street level active storefronts to create that pedestrian environment in the downtown. You don't want to have a blank wall or a parking court for a hotel. So if hotels do get developed in the downtown, I would strongly recommend that. So just you got to be careful about unintended consequences. the concept of limiting tourists. It just may not be supported by limiting hotels. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for being gracious about that. All right, welcome.
Hi, my name is
Next.
Sherry Harrison, and I'm a little surprised at the planning here. I would think we would be looking at a map that would include all of the permitted hotels that are going in, and that we would then see cumulative impacts on traffic and restaurant patronage, utilities such as the ratio of fossil fuels to renewable energy. And I was a winery vice president back in the 80s when we had quite an economic crash. Wineries were going down, going bankrupt, and it impacted the retail here. And we had a very fine wine from Amador County last night, Sauvignon Blanc. And it was 12% alcohol and really fruity. And that's another thing that the future may hold for this area, is that people will go to cooler areas with climate change. And the ratio of world product right now to world debt has increased over what it was in 2008. And so what Trump has done is going to keep our economy blooming for a while, but then the chances of a bigger crash are certainly real. And so I think Healdsburg's got the plan for diversity to protect for that. Thank you.
So much. Thanks. Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, Brian Summer, Healdsburg resident. So I'll just say thank you and congratulations, Mayor and Vice Mayor. Yes, it's been that long since I've been in the chamber. So I just would like to say also, please come support the high school boys. Tomorrow night's their last home game. It is a NCS playoff game. They did win their league and their league post-tournament, so if any of you can make it tomorrow night, come to the high school at 7. I have interesting opinions, and you know, if the back of the room wants to hiss and talk while I'm talking, you know, I'm sorry for the way you were raised. But I think Alan Cohen really said most of everything, so hopefully I don't need to echo what he said. But I guess for the city, who prepared the study with the little graph of the causes, the pros and the cons of what would happen? I don't know if it was economic experts, hotel experts, if it ties to the RUDAT or the SDAT that's coming up. And it's interesting, I don't know why we're in such a rush right now when we've engaged with the AIA to do a study, and they're really going to tell us kind of some things about our town and some planning and things like that. So I'm just kind of going through what Alan already said. I have notes here. Interesting point for people who don't like to go to the plaza. The RUDAT said that we should have a Zocalo where Latinos could come to get together and talk. And almost every morning, every afternoon, every evening when I walk by there, there's a group and I say hi and we talk. So they found a way in the midst of all these tourists to still enjoy the plaza. So I think that's a very interesting point. And that they do it on Saturday, Sunday, Monday through Friday. About diversity, I think most of the people that spoke against or for banning hotels, I would really question whether that's a whole representative of the entire community. I mean, all of them kind of fit the same mold. And I mean, that's just from what I've seen tonight. And I guess some concerns for me would be, at what time did small town character, like at what time in history did that become about brick and mortar? Because when I look at small town charm, I think that's in the hearts and souls of the community members that make up the small town. So I mean, I would really, it's a sad day if we've traded, humans for buildings. And then just would finish, again, just by saying you're a wise counsel. And I've seen your reasoning and your deduction and your leadership. I mean, we worked together a lot last year. I appreciate the way you listen and respond. I know that you all care. So I just would encourage you to continue being good leaders of your people. So thank you.
Thank you. And welcome anyone else that would like to speak on the issue. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Deb Kravitz again. I'm interested in housing, so whatever the council decides to do about hotels, I just want to remind them about the sensitivities and the connections and how, things in this city don't run without the hotels. I think it's wonderful how we have the amazing Parks and Rec system we have that we get through the TOT. But I was also very intrigued by the idea about doing the in lieu of payments or having a hotel inclusionary requirement so that we can really ramp up both our coffers or actual building of some affordable housing in this town. There are limits on the physical amount of land available to build on, but I believe with the Saggio Hills property, we have something like 11 acres set aside for affordable housing that we can't yet afford to build on. So having some hotels contribute to that, I think would be amazing and would have a long-term impact on the housing situation in the town.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Ms. Mayor, council members. But it seems to me somewhat contrary to the idea of having a downtown that is alive and activated to move our visitors out to the perimeter or to the Holiday Inn in Windsor. If we want a lively downtown, we could have hotels that had retail on the first floor, commercial on the second floor, hotel rooms, and residential spaces, apartments within the same structure. There's no reason that that could not be done. So we could have transient occupancy in a building that also supported 3 completely different uses. I've stayed in places like that in other cities where a hotel wasn't designated as the only use of a physical structure. The other reason to think that we wouldn't want people driving in was mentioned by Alan. We don't need more cars cruising downtown to find a parking place. We want a pedestrian-oriented, active community, like a small village in Europe with cobbled streets and people walking from where they're staying to where they're eating, to the museum, to the art center, and to all the other things that make our community charming to people who visit here. So the idea of eliminating there aren't that many places that additional hotels could be built. So a hotel could be designed to enhance street life and the quality of experience downtown. You wouldn't get that if you put another one out on Dry Creek or in the Southern Triangle near the entrance. So I think you need to think about what the city should be like 20 years from now in terms of pedestrian activity. If we're going to get away from internal combustion engines and we want people to walk and ride, we want them closer to the core, not further away. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this topic? Welcome.
Hello, I'm Mark McMullen, Parkland Farms. I'm in support of letting the market determine what hotels need to be downtown. I think that we need to think about the fact that we're a tourism town. And also we're a city. We're not the town of Healdsburg. We're the city of Healdsburg. Business is what runs our downtown. So I agree that we should have retail on the bottom floor. We should utilize that as the TOT. It's bringing in revenue for the city. I think that's who we are, and we need to understand how tourism impacts our own daily lives. Perhaps we need to expand our tourism outside of the wine and food area and get into art tourism and recreational tourism with more bicyclists, which some people don't want, runners, more people going up to up to Fitch Mountain when that opens, and up to the open space area in Parkland Farms. We just need to understand that this is all part of who we are, and I'm in support of letting the market determine where the hotels go. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Heidi Marino. Just to the last speaker who was saying the market, let the market determine. I would just like to say the market doesn't determine anything. It's rules and regulations who determine. And those rules and regulations are determined by individuals and groups. So it's, I'm just tired of hearing this. The market decides. No, it's people who decides. And it's people, generally it's people who have a lot of influence with their money. And as, Jim Hyde was coming down pretty heavily on people who are criticizing the buildup of hotels by saying that people who are on the other side don't have time to come here. Excuse my voice, I have a cold. Because they have to tend to their families and they have work to do. So I assume that we all in here who are against the further buildup of hotels are just ne'er-do-wells, we're just lazy bums sitting around, and we come here for entertainment. I think it's really an insult to hear from him. Thank you.
Okay, this is important that we keep it open to anybody who wants to put in their words about this issue. And again, this started out because Councilman Nuyokis asked for a CUP discussion for hotels, but as we all know, the city has been questioning this issue of livability and balance, and there's all this swirling, so we do go off in different ways, but we're definitely, as a community, really wrestling with where we're going to go. So it gets emotional, and I hope we can be respectful. I understand it's challenging, and I can get there myself sometimes. There's so much going on, but I appreciate everybody trying to express their best arguments about what they think in terms of this idea of our downtown core and what we want to see in it. So I'm going to invite one last time any public comment. You've all come here tonight. Just want to offer a civil discourse on the topic of hotels in our downtown core. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for listening to us. I know it's long. Okay. So, do we have a tipping point? That question came up last May. We said, let's study it. I mean, how many of us really know whether there's a tipping point or not? But we're concerned that there may be, and that would negatively affect our economy and hurt what it is that we've created. I don't want to see hotels eat up the tourism host. So there's that. In terms of hotels on the outskirts, I think a lot of people would just like to see fewer hotels, or at least start managing what we have rather than continuing to build on it. But if we have hotels out on the outskirts, let's use shuttles. Let's use electric shuttles. So it's not an issue of tourism or no tourism. It's an issue of balance between residents and visitors. It's diversifying our economy for resilience, because we want to be here. We want to thrive into the future. And in that respect, I would say let's let this SDAT process play out and let it inform where we're going. Now, the one thing that I haven't heard said here tonight is about water. The 2010 and 2015 Urban Water Management Plan convinces me that we don't have enough water during a drought year to provide for all those new hotels and to maintain our green landscape, especially the trees. I don't know that we're really so concerned about the lawns. In one drought year, I think it was 2013, we got only 8 inches of rain. And that year showed that another single drought year could result in supply dipping below demand. All this should be in the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan. Year to date, I have recorded slightly more than 15 inches of rain. This time last year, the total was more than 65 inches. That was enough to fill our reservoirs, but it did nothing to replenish the aquifers. So it looks like the drought trend is continuing. I would like, when you think about hotels, you think about what people do when they're in a hotel. The visitors that I hosted, they wanted to use that spa, and they had been camping, and they thought, oh, this is really great. And so they filled that tub up. So think about the water. Think about the resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Tim Tuscany. I live on North and Fitch. I, about a year or so ago, nearly had a heart attack and picked up walking. So I walk everywhere. Moved here in 1988, and so I've seen Healdsburg grow up. And my concern with the growth of Healdsburg and the hotels is the amount of other businesses that are associated with them. This doesn't reflect the amount of drinking establishments that goes along with the hotels. This morning, I was talking to somebody, and they said, well, Healdsburg used to be known for all the biker bars and stuff that come along with the plaza. Well, that's been replaced by other bars and wineries and stuff. When I walk around downtown, frequently there's people falling down drunk. I used to work on the evening shift at the convalescent hospital. I would walk around and I would see people falling down drunk, people in the bushes, people making out drunk. So I think while limiting the hotels, there's the associated cost of increased policing, the businesses that have their windows smashed in, puke on the sidewalk, broken bottles, all of that stuff. I don't think that's been spoken about. Plus, I can't park in front of my home anymore. There's just no parking. Anytime any events happen downtown, anything on the plaza, anything on Plaza Street, anything like that, there's just no parking. I know you guys have heard this to exhaustion, but that's just the basic cold hard facts. When I moved here in '88, this was a cute home or a cute town. It's grown up. It's still a cute town, but it's nothing like it was then. So that's that.
And we have someone else. Okay, we've got about 10 more minutes here.
I'm Dennis Carvalho, 190 Old Rossi Place. I've been in Healdsburg my whole life, and about 50 years ago, Jack Quimby was the mayor. He came home. My dad was bringing me home from school. Jack pulled him over and said, last night we voted to turn Healdsburg into Carmel. I said, what does that mean? Well, since then, everybody seems to think each time they say it, it's the first time it's ever been heard. But Healdsburg is no Carmel. Carmel's no Healdsburg. I mean, there's just totally different personalities. I've been down to Carmel recently, and they're pretty much done. I mean, they've got ordinances that don't make Healdsburg look like a, you know, this is, I mean, you guys have an opportunity where they don't. They're pretty much done down there. You know, Healdsburg has always been a real nice town. As far as shopping goes, you know, we were kids. We always went to Santa Rosa to buy clothes. I mean, there were stores in town, but, you know, it's always, Santa Rosa was always kind of our shop, you know, the shopping for people in Healdsburg. And even though it was local shopping and things, and Healdsburg's grown up pretty nice. It took 50 years to get it to what it looks like right now, and I've heard a lot of great input. You know, it sounds like the parking probably is maybe one of the keys. And, you know, and I like, you know, it's hard to know where to do it. You put a double decker out here in the back, and or I mean across the street over here. I mean, there's eventually something's going to happen because people continue to come. I've traveled around and a little bit, and you tell people where you're from, and people say, "Oh, I love Healdsburg. I love Healdsburg. We're an international destination. We're no little." You know, when I was a kid, yeah, you drive up and down Healdsburg Avenue. There was nothing. There was nothing until in high school where they started tearing stuff down. But we've come a long way. In 1968, there was like 8 wineries locally. Well, how many we got now? About 400. I mean, they brought their own stuff with it. You know, you look at all the hotels being built in Santa Rosa and Roner Park and Windsor. You know, they're filling a need for Healdsburg, but they're still bringing the cars like everybody else is talking. Healdsburg definitely has a neat personality. You know, as a local, you know where to go. You know who the locals are. There's plenty of stuff for locals to conjugate. We never went downtown as kids. Now I come to Healdsburg on the weekends as a tourist when people come in from out of town. But you know, it's our personality is to continue to develop. You guys have a great opportunity to kind of rein it in if we can. We've kind of made our bed to a point, but there's still some room to, I guess, put a different comforter on it. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? I'm inviting you. All right. Yes? Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Tim Unger, Plaza Street. I don't pretend to possess the wisdom that Mr. Harrison has or that he shared with us, given the time on this earth that he spent. I thought he said some pretty wise things. But one of the things I wanted to share with you, that's something I use often to provide myself with context when I'm entertaining different people's opinions. And it's wise words that George Will of the Washington Post offered. He said, if the answer to the question isn't money, you're asking the wrong question. And that takes into account whether it's all about the bed tax or it's about somebody's income level or whether or not they're retired or not or whether they're coming. But as you put your magnifying glass and look clearly and listen intently, try to remember that. It's really telling. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak tonight on the issue of the hotels in the downtown core? All set? Okay, one more. Welcome.
I'm Martha Sherritt on Pordone. I live here full time still. I was talking to a young woman who's an artist today who works probably 3 or 4 jobs. She works in a local art gallery. She used to wait on tables at Shed. She also works for the fancy florist behind City Hall. And I said, how you doing? And she said, well, I'm okay, but I just don't know if I fit in this town anymore. There is nothing I can afford to do. We're losing all of our kind of young, fringe, artistic people because they can't really afford to live here anymore. And unless you like to drink wine 24/7, we're also losing our places to go or things to do. I mean, there are just a couple of restaurants where I feel like I can go in anymore dressed like this. Like after I take a dog walk, like the only place that's cool anymore that you can afford is a burrito. And it just made me think this is not the town I moved to just 5.5 years ago. It is a tourist destination now, and I think we have built it and they are coming. And the more we're advertising that we're a food and wine mecca, the more they will come. And we just have to decide whether we want a town where real people still get to live and raise their families and people still know each other and take out their own garbage cans, or we want a town where every other house is empty except for the occasional weekend. And I really think if we toss out our living room, this public space that we all get to use and that we share, we're just saying we're a tourist town. And I really rue the loss of the little sewing store. That was one of my first classes I took post-college, was I learned how to put zippers in a pillow, and I used the sweet little cooking store. It's the only thing we've got. And it's come to the point where when I have friends who visit, I can do the town in a day. And then I want to take them to the coast or Petaluma or some town that feels like a real town that's vital, that's not just a wine lounge. So I hate to see us sell out our last little bit of real estate that feels like a real, genuine town. That's all I've got to add. Thanks.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Harrison, and I moved to Healdsburg in 1979. We used to live out on West Side Road. Now we have moved into town. When we first came to Healdsburg, Garrett Hardware was still on the square, and there was a Mexican restaurant where the Hotel Healdsburg is now, and the waiter used to come and slap the cockroaches off the wall. And I just like to say that Healdsburg is still my town. I could still walk around downtown, by the library, anywhere, and it still feels like my town, even though I've been here, since 1979. So that's good, but I don't know if the fabric store goes and the cooking store goes, and I wouldn't like to see those things happen. So a balance is what we need.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes because I wanted to do an hour because, again, that December 5th meeting, there was like 10 or 15 minutes, and I know there were people that came that night, so I really wanted to be sensitive to that. So is anyone else wanting to speak on the issue of hotels in the downtown core and CUPs? Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having this meeting. My name is Susan Lazareski, and I live full-time here. And right now, I'm struggling with just feeling really powerless in being in this country and not feeling heard and feeling small and individual and not having money of a big corporation behind me. And I feel really frustrated and helpless sometimes here, because there's no way the people that live here have the power that people do that have big corporations and big hotel money and things like that. So I just wanted to share that with you. I would really love to see a study done where people can give you feedback, because I feel like the people that I talk to feel a lot like I do. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we've got one here, and then you're next. Is that okay? Thank you. All right.
I'm Annette Leader. I've lived here for about 15 years, and I hear a lot of people talking about tipping point. to, yeah, yeah. And I think that's how I'm feeling as well. You know, when we have the general elections, I don't know anything about local politics, I'm afraid, or local government, how it works. But every time there's this state and federal elections, I'm asked to vote on things I have absolutely zero domain expertise in. And I don't understand why California does that. And I think what we're hearing here today is that we'd like an opportunity to vote on things, existential things like we're talking about here. So, like I said, I don't know what the process is. I don't know whether it has to be the council who decides this stuff, but I think we need to do some kind of survey or local vote on these types of major issues about our town.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Mark Barmersbach, and I live out on West Side Road. Although I live slightly out of town, this is where I pick up my mail, and this is where I patronize the local shops. This is my town. But I wanted to just address the issue about the conditional use permit. No one really brought that up, and I guess that was maybe one of the reasons why this effort may have been started. Out in the county, we deal with discretionary use permits or conditional use permits all the time related to tasting rooms and event centers, like on West Side Road. And while it would help having a conditional use permit process as part of the code, it isn't a panacea. It will require people to ask some questions and answer some questions, but at the end of the day, unless there's some real hard guidelines that you folks would put in the zoning code, it still ends up being a contentious process if there's no standards to apply for the planning commissioner or planning staff to apply. And that's exactly the problem we have at the county level, is projects get very far along and the developer has an expectation they're going to get a use permit or a conditional use permit at the end of the process. And it doesn't really address the underlying issue, which is how much is, when is enough in terms of the number of facilities. So I just caution you that if the solution is just a conditional use permit, that isn't the whole answer that I think you need. You really need some standards, whatever they are, for these parts of the community. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I suggested an hour, and I think we almost hit that. So I just want to make sure that no one has anything last minute here they want to bring up that hasn't been raised. Any issue that you would like to speak on in terms of this question we're addressing? Anybody else in the public? Okay. Is there someone else, or are they just leaving? I guess, okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and close public comment now and come back to the podium. So,
that doesn't require a motion.
So at this point, what are my fellow council members feeling about what's happened tonight in terms of our staff report and then now the rich public feedback that we received? What does anyone want to begin?
Mayor, if I could, excuse me, if I could ask, I think there were some statements made in the public comment that
you wanted to
probably could get some clarification from I'm a guess there are some statements that weren't quite true. So I wanted to get some clarification from.
I wasn't sure on protocol if that was something that we did with public comment on an item of old business, but we may do that if you'd like. What is the standard for that? Should we address, because there were questions that were raised, but I don't know what you're suggesting. You want to go through and talk about what's true and what isn't true about what?
Well, there are some, I think specifically related to city business, hotels that are not in development. There's the one particular across from H3 that was.
So the as far as hotels that are actively in development, and I'll defer to Maya if I get this wrong. Of course, we have H3, which is I believe called the Harmon House now, which is currently under construction. We don't have any other hotels that I'm aware of in the area in question that have submitted anything or submitted any applications. Of course, we have Replay Resorts, which is south of this area. Which I believe they're proposing a 55 or 56 bedroom key hotel, and then there is the Sajo Hills, which they are north of town. Of course, everybody knows that that's going to be the Montage, which will be everybody knows the Sajo project in town, 130 rooms, and I believe we are working with a developer across the street. We refer to as the RJW lot, and I'm not sure on the project description if they are proposing a hotel at this point.
122.
122 rooms there. Those are the hotels which we're aware of. We know that there was somebody in town some time ago who was quite vocal about developing something at a parking lot across the street from Hotel Healdsburg, from the Hotel Healdsburg Bar and Grill. We have not seen any plans or anything like that for any development hotel there. So that's, as far as active permits or applications, I don't believe we have anything in the queue, if you will, nor have we, I believe, even met with anybody discussing those projects. I'm going to defer to Maya, though.
That's correct.
Okay.
And there was a second statement about water use, because I had that specific question too of city manager. I was wondering if you could.
Sure, I can give you a little bit of information. Mr. Crowley, anticipating a question on water, provided me some information today. There's a report that was done in 2016, which detailed the water by sector, and I can give you some information on that. And Terry mentioned, or Mr. Crowley mentioned, that our numbers are pretty consistent with that. 72% of all of our water use is related to residential use. 6% of water use goes towards accommodation and food service. So we've seen that number decrease over the years, partially because of the drought and the conservation measures that have been taken. We also see hotels having pretty strict, as do other residential units with the rebuilding code. Water conservation is obviously a big part of those. I can get more information with regards to water use in hotels. There was a report done back in 2016, which talks about water use, but that's what I can get you at this point.
Fine. That answers my question.
Okay, any other comments or questions coming up from the council here about ideas? Or I just want to generally state that this is so confusing for me, okay? Because we never had, in my opinion, in this city, a decision about what we value in terms of the balance. And I bring this up, and I'm responsible for this, being on council for 3 years. I feel like we're really dealing with issues that aren't just about this topic, but really about balance and livability and those same values. So yeah, we have the the SDAT study coming, the AIA is coming, and we have all this. And then we have the citizens group that literally put together back in July, we all learned about this in August, a flyer about the tipping point. And we heard from some of the people, obviously, that are responsible for that literature. And so I feel really uncomfortable tonight because I do share a lot of the concerns about the issue of this Plaza Park. And as mayor, I know I'm not supposed to go first, but I just have to say, I've done some studying and reading about the Healdsburg Museum and how they characterize the man that is the benefactor for this town, and the fact that he gifted deeds to certain lots. These included lots for the town plaza. This is the man that started this whole gig, right? He donates all this, the old cemetery, which is now St. John's School, 2 lots for schools, 4 lots for Healdsburg's first churches. These donations allowed the fledgling institutions and therefore the town itself to change from a string town to a place for families to settle. But he gifted and deeded that plaza. So the plaza is the big ticket item. I mean, that's what we're talking about. What do we want to value in that plaza? It's a public park. It's the center of our town, and it gets a lot of focus. I know I give it a lot of focus. So when we talk about the downtown core and the value of being on the plaza, so I think that's one issue that comes up for me as someone that's been trying to make decisions that will support the people that live in this town, at the same time have an opportunity to allow people to thrive economically off this town as you build things and create more wealth for yourselves in real estate and other things. As a woman that doesn't have any conflict of interest, my 700 form, look at it. I have nothing to gain from anything financially from this town. In fact, I would argue I'm doomed at this point because my property taxes keep going up. I don't want to move, but my property taxes go up every year. I bought the house for a certain price, and it's like, I pay for the prosperity of others in that respect, I suppose. It doesn't benefit me. So I guess my concern as a citizen and mayor in this year of 2018 is the balance. And so I have a hard time voting on this tonight because I hear what people are saying about the downtown businesses and maybe letting the hotels grow and then but I'm really concerned about our plaza staying a livable area for local people. It's not like it's an either or, but I do think that it is at a crisis point right now in so many ways. And I really appreciated the point about, feeling helpless. Right now, I think there's a lot of helplessness going on in our world and in particularly with money and profit. And I would argue that this council has a responsibility to look not just at hotels, but the issues that we hopefully are going to get to. And hopefully city manager will help us with that, because he's talking about a survey now that will help us as a council in March to make some city council goals. And, we always talk about affordable housing, but we also need to look at that issue of the balance of tourism. I know a lot of us talk about that all the time, but what are we doing to support it? So I just don't know how comfortable I am making a motion to say, yeah, let's do CUPs, when I don't think CUPs are the answer. I think it's going to take much more of a dramatic planning strategy for our city. And, it is going to disrupt people's ability to make money on this town. Some of you know, because people are coming in and there's a lot of big money coming in. And I'm just going to say I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't like it. So I really want to preserve the downtown core. I see where the citizens group has come forward. I've read their literature. It's been almost a year. Well, not quite, but it's been a while since we've been able to talk about this. And I would like staff, this is the question I would like to have answered. How does our general plan support limiting and prohibiting more hotel rooms being created in our downtown core? How has our general plan supported this issue of balance? And I think the variables are, over concentration. We've talked about this with alcohol. Now we need to maybe look at it in terms of our visitors staying on the plaza. The area that for some people they still see is their downtown, not just a place where you can just keep spinning tourism around it. And the other thing I guess I just want my council to realize is we have an urgent issue here. Our public is coming to us tonight and on lots of levels. It's not an either or, but I think people tonight are frustrated and they want to make sure that they have their voice heard, and they don't want us to only be making the decision. And I don't know if we could actually create a vote, but I do think we need to get more public input on this issue than just frame it around CUPs for hotels in the downtown core. It has to do with, again, looking at what we want to be in the future. And I just really see some compelling points tonight regarding what we're doing as a council to support the people that live here all the time, how they can keep a downtown feeling for themselves. And that plaza that Harmon Heald donated, gave away, so he knew that he could create this town that we're all living in now, would be a viable place for families and not just for whoever has the most money or the new idea to come in and create profit. And I just think livability, I'm back to that word, is the issue. So I would like staff to look at how does this actually, how would the general plan support us limiting hotels in the downtown core? And really narrowly look at it that way, which I know is like flipping it, but that's what I would want. And that's where I'll bring in this discussion. I just have a really hard time talking just about CUPs when this is a huge issue about what's happening to Healdsburg and what's happening to our plaza area specifically. So. Gold, would you like to? Yeah.
Certainly. This has been a really terrific discussion, and I've really appreciated all the thoughtful input that we've heard tonight. I just have a high regard for all of you who've come forward and expressed yourself on this topic. I wish that we already had the results of this survey, because I would like to see some completely unbiased, scientifically gathered data on this topic. What I know anecdotally from what the letters people write, from the things we've heard tonight, from what I talking to people when I was campaigning last spring, is that my hunch is that most people feel like we either have just the right amount of tourism or too much. I don't think there's very many people who feel like we really need a lot more hotels. And I know there are a lot of people who feel very anxious about the potential effects of new hotels that are already being planned. So for me, from my perspective, it's hard for me to see a downside from just zoning downtown, no more hotels. I think whatever that gets built will serve the city as well. It'll have retail, it'll have visitor lodging, that won't be a hotel, something like that. But I think that I can't see any real negative consequence to that. And I can't really, frankly, see any real general plan inconsistency. It seems to me that the relevant general plan elements are pretty vaguely written, and I just don't see where it's a stark inconsistency. So I wouldn't have a problem with doing that. I think it certainly could be changed again in the future. If my judgment's incorrect, another council could choose to change the zoning again and change it back, but I would be fine with that. Further, I really think we do need to consider the effect on housing of hotels and then the restaurants that serve the hotel guests, because they do require a lot of fairly low-paid employees. So I would further, whether we limit downtown hotels or not, I do think we should pursue a inclusionary housing ordinance for hotel construction in any part of the city, so that can, they can kind of contribute to providing some housing for their employees, as we saw done so nicely, thank you, David, with the Trio Hotel. So I think that's where I stand right now.
Councilman McCaffrey, please.
Yeah, I agree with your a lot of your sentiments on. I think the inclusionary housing piece, or something like that, something to I think we refer to it, as the conditions kind of. I mean, the conditional use permit. It's okay. What conditions are you able to purchase or to build the hotel with? And I think an inclusionary housing, I think, is a good one, but I'm sure that there's other ones out there that we might not know about, or maybe there's other opportunities. As far as the downtown, I believe that we could make a designation of a large and a small hotel, and I don't know what that really means, what size it is. That could be determined in the future, but something that's going to have less of an impact. So the things that if you look at the list here that's up on the screen, you see that there are a number of larger, it was on the screen. Yeah, it's okay. There are a number of larger hotels, which, I mean, by real hotel standards, they're not even that large, but for the downtown, they are the largest there. If you look at another few, they're peppered within developments that have retail, they have residential, like take, 235, for example. There's retail, there's residential and hotel in that development, and that's what allows that kind of thing to be built and make it financially viable. So I would be interested in making some sort of so the thing that I worry about is I worry about the larger properties, turning into potentially a very large hospitality project. And I think that what I get from speaking with the public is that that's their major concern as well, is that something very large with a very large impact right next to downtown would really be a problem. Although I also recognize that you want to have a vibrant downtown, and you want people, when they visit, they want to, the ultimate thing is to be right there, and that having a hotel on the outskirts of town versus right downtown where everybody wants to be is going to create more traffic problems, because you have to drive in. Whereas if you're there to walk, I I mean, I think Richard Berg had a really good argument on that. So I would be interested in looking at some sort of an inclusionary condition, and also kind of saying in the downtown, hotels of only such size, outside of the downtown, a different size, and making that recommendation to staff to come back with something of what is that number? What is the number that could encompass a development that would allow it to fund itself and to subsidize retail businesses and other businesses that could be used by locals, and also be a viable thing that could actually work.
Thank you. Neokis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, first of all, I guess I could say you're welcome. Maybe it's well for bringing it up. Well, I also want to say thank you, Dr. DeRosa. You had a lot of things to worry about, and this on top of it. Thank you for all the work you've been doing. I want to go back to one of the things I said early when we did the work session, right? That to me, I really want to avoid this a false dichotomy of either we do tourism or we don't, or it's not. And none of the decisions we make are that should be seen that way. It really is it's more of an either or, gray middle road, middle path kind of direction that we can take, that we should take. I also want to say something about there was a comment Mr. Unger mentioned about the following the money, right? Well, I kind of feel like if we were to look at look, we're all interested. Residents are very interested in maintaining the authenticity of the town, right? We want to make sure that the town that we're keeping it real, right? I would like to think that enlightened developers are looking at their bottom line and in their money mind are thinking that they also want to maintain that authenticity. Not all of them, but some of them, the enlightened ones, the ones that we would like to encourage to partner with us, right? So I think they would be very interested in the same kinds of things that we're interested in, keeping that authenticity going, implementing projects that keep the town and the downtown and vibrant and livable, right? And it's those people that I like to partner with. I like to, and when I think about the middle road path, it's coming up, constructing rules or incentives that encourage that kind of partnership. So that's kind of the spirit that I'm looking at here, right? As far as the truth is that hotels they do create impacts, right? And the question is how do we mitigate them? What are the impacts, and how do we mitigate them? This is kind of the recurring theme here, right? And I think that it's true that we have an SDAT process that's coming up. We've got the survey, right? That's going out. We've had 2 rounds of livability forum. I think I think it's still an ongoing discussion about what are the impacts. But I think we've got plenty of information in front of us that we can take version 1.0 of a stab at taking this middle road of finding that balance, right? And then continue to tweak it as we learn more about the residents and about how the decisions we make have impacts, right? So I think that to me the CUP has a real strong is a really nice way of finding that middle road. It's not an outright ban, and it's not just do whatever you want. It's okay. Here let's look at the impacts and make sure that the project has aspects of it that mitigate those impacts. Right now, can we if we come up with a CUP process, does that mean it's done and can't change? No. Maybe next year we'll after learning through the SDAT or talking to the community, we can identify different impacts and different mitigations, right? So I don't think that going forward with a CUP process is necessarily that's it, and we can't adjust it, right? I like the idea. So as far as like what would be, what would the kind of impacts, what would be the mitigations? I think that the street level retail is a huge, I think is a really big deal, and I think it's an easy no-brainer, right? You look at how it's affected, how it kind of activates the street corridor along H2, the Hotel Healdsburg, right? You can see it how, maybe even better example would be the retail that's in place at under Healdsburg Inn and the Plaza, right? You've got Noble Folk, right? And then you've got Noble Folk is my best example. So having that requiring that street level retail, to me, is a no-brainer, and I think it again, any enlightened developer would be like, oh, for sure, no question, right? I think the workforce housing, I mean, we had this discussion before, but thinking about the workforce housing component a little bit more and seeing how Seaview was able to do this on 110 Dry Creek, the nice thing about workforce housing is that it's something that a developer is already kind of, a hotel developer, they know how to do it. It's a kind of an inexpensive way to add back to the community from their perspective, right? It also helps to contribute to that keeping it real aspect, right? And also, I want referring back to Mr. Berg's observation that why couldn't a hotel have a mix of residential and hotel in the same mix? I even go on top of one further and say, why couldn't we have a hotel that could, in the long term, convert to residential down the road, right? So I think the workforce housing aspect to me is very interesting. But I also would like to be able to Councilmember McCaffrey, to your point, allow for some creativity, right? Allow for a hotel developer to say, excuse me, yes, Healdsburg, I see your concerns. I see that these are some suggestions, but I have another idea. What do you think about this? Maybe it's what Sebastopol is doing is a hostel, right? To create that kind of interesting mix of visitors in the downtown. Who knows what they'll come up with? Now, if we were to do something like this, I would like to have that, some kind of flexibility for the developer to come up with their own innovative way of helping us address these concerns that we have as a community. And then finally, one thing we've been talking about the housing action plan, right? As a document that the community kind of works together to identify how we could work with housing developers to develop the kind of housing that we have in town. Maybe as down the road, we're going to come up with the idea of a tourism action plan where we identify these are the kinds of ways that we like our tourism to develop. Developers, private industry, how can we work together to get to realize these visions as a community? But I think that's obviously out there, but who knows? So those are my rambling thoughts. Thank you for indulging.
All right, Vice Mayor Higley.
Took a bunch of notes. First, I wanted to thank everybody that came and spoke tonight. It was really great to hear everybody's perspectives and where they're coming from, and the feedback, including all the emails and phone calls that we've gotten. We do listen to all of those. Just a couple of comments. I think as Healdsburg, we have gotten to the point, in fact, we've passed the point of, having to look to a developer and say, how much money is in it for us? And I think we're more toward the point of, well, what's the benefit for the community? Whether it's hotels or cannabis or whatever issue might come up. And that's something that's unique that we are lucky to have, to be in that position, and that's been built up over the years. When you talk to other cities and people from different, counties, they don't have that I don't want to call it a problem, but they don't have that option. At the NCRA meeting, two of the board members or two of the directors are from Humboldt County, and they were excited because they are now going to get. They were saying last year they had 0 cruise ships come to Humboldt Bay, and this year they had 28, and they were high-fiving each other. It's just a different perspective that different towns have, and when developers come to Healdsburg, I don't blame them. They look at, okay, my rents are going to be this, my profits are going to be that, but at the end of the day, they've got to figure out how it's going to benefit the people that live here. I think that's the key. You made a comment. I just want to clarify. You had mentioned that hotel developers already know how to do residential. I want to be cautious about lumping that together because they are two different financing vehicles. So somebody that is a hotel developer doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be an expert at the residential side, and it's different financing. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but I want to be careful that we make sure that we have that discussion about how those two can be melded together before we just start, throwing out, oh, this is a requirement. I did want to touch on perspective. So I heard a lot about I can't go downtown and it's overrun by tourists or, some of that. And, I have a young family. I have a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. And, this last weekend, my wife had a workout class in Santa Rosa. So I had the kids. We parked right over here. I actually rented one of the bike share bikes. And the kids were on their scooters. We tootled around town, played around in the plaza. My wife was done, came up. We went to Journeyman, had a little salami platter, went back to the plaza, just enjoyed the day. And, I want to make sure that people keep in mind that there is more than one perspective in town. And we, as council members, represent everybody. And it doesn't mean that one opinion is right or wrong or dismissive or perspective, because there was a gentleman, I can't remember who it was, that mentioned, I think it was you, talked about people throwing up at night. I don't see that because I'm at home at 8 o'clock on a weekend. So that's a perspective that I don't see, but it doesn't mean that I dismiss where you're coming from. I appreciate you mentioning that because that's gathering all the information is important for us. I don't support a moratorium on downtown hotels. I think, the proper place to discuss this is, through something like a general plan amendment or something that's more a bigger process like we just did with the design guidelines, where you have public input over multiple meetings. There's, kind of this is the direction we want to go. I think, to me, process is important. We have rules in place, rules to follow. To me, process is important. And through that process, I think it's important. I mean, there are some questions. Councilmember McCaffrey mentioned size. Do we want the Marriott Marquis size, 132 rooms downtown? I mean, I don't think anybody up here would say, yeah, let's go for it. On the other hand, small rooms sprinkled here and there, I mean, is that a bad thing? I think that's the kind of this discussion that we can expand upon based on what we've heard here today. There's some other questions that I have, that I would like clarification on. So just hypothetically, say on a weekend we get 100 visitors and we have 20 hotel rooms, which means 20 of the visitors are staying in the hotel room. So the question is, okay, if we add 10 more hotel rooms, does that mean now we have 110 people coming? Or is it 30 of them are staying in a hotel room, so our tourist count doesn't really jump up by the added rooms because now they're actually staying here, they're spending money in town, they're not driving to the core of the town, they're walking around, they're not, on Dry Creek Road saying, well, should we drive downtown or should we drive to Calistoga? We kind of have a little bit more of a captive audience. I mean, those are some of the questions that I think would come out in a, something similar to maybe more expanded work session type environment like we did on Friday with our council discussion. Same with the events. I think that's an interesting thing that was discussed on the hotel trio about limiting events and kind of crossing that out, saying, hey, there's a concern about parking, where it's not so much about the events specifically, but the impact of that specific event. I think, the last thing, going back to the process, during the campaign, I had supported Measure R. And when I was out knocking on doors, there are a lot of things I liked in Measure R. I didn't think it was perfect, but when I was out knocking on doors, the one thing I heard over and over is, if Measure R passes, all it takes is 3 council members and it changes. And that's where now, I see in some of the literature that, hey, all you need is 3 council members and you can ban this thing. This goes back to my feeling with process and trust. And I think, at the time when I would tell people that didn't support Measure R, I said, listen, I believe in process. So if this is what the voters vote, yeah, 3 council members can change the allocations or whatever was in the detail there. I'm going to look at the big picture in the process, and that hasn't changed. For this and going forward, I do believe in process. I do believe in fair play and being able to look at, we have planning documents. There is a way to amend those, and if that's the direction that the community wants us to go, I think that's the proper avenue to do it, not by 3 votes to suddenly change the zoning ordinance. So that's where I would differ slightly, but I'm up here to be part of the conversation, and I appreciate my fellow council members listening, and those are kind of my points or my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think this is so predictable to have it's just all over the place up here, in my opinion. I'm trying to track it, I really am, but I started it out because I really feel like the big issue, and I really hope that, City Manager, you can hear this, because I want to make sure that I'm being clear. We need to get more public input about this issue. I know that we have this group that came forward back in August, and then Councilman Niyokis, went ahead and asked for a CUP discussion on hotels in the downtown core. And then in December, we had a workshop in here before a council meeting where we got more information about CUPs, but we didn't have much public input. And then tonight, patiently, here we are at 8:35, and there's people that came up, and there's a lot of good information and a lot of good public comment. But I don't really know what to say other than I think it completely makes sense why it's so messy. It's because it's more than just this issue. However, this issue is in front of us, and we as a council, whether it's 3 votes, 4 votes, no votes, we have an opportunity to direct our staff and to direct our city manager, and to actually move forward with some kind of a response to a group of people, all of the people that have spoken tonight, regarding what's happening to the plaza. So, and that's where we're focused, is the plaza area. So, I'm here. Yeah, I'm just want to just clarify. I heard one person confirm that they could go in the direction of, I don't know, do we want to employ the word moratorium?
Definitely not.
Okay, so what were you?
Because a moratorium has certain legal definitions, and I don't think we want to go there. No, I would support discussing a zoning change. That would make no more new hotels in the downtown corridor. The downtown district rather. There still would be visitor lodging. That would still continue, but it wouldn't necessarily be in the form of a hotel.
Okay.
So I would support that,
okay.
And I would support the idea of having inclusionary housing. I think more than one council member has echoed that sentiment. I'm not so excited about the CUP idea, but if that's the way the council wants to go, then maybe we could do something with that would help guide our growth in the direction that we want.
Okay, and to clarify, do you mind if I ask everyone to go down? So clarifying, would you be supportive of moving forward to look at?
I think my position is pretty much mirrors what Councilmember Gold was saying. And when I talked about a CUP as in the conditions, what I really mean is like an inclusionary housing ordinance or something, or a commercial linkage thing, kind of like what Councilmember Niyokis was talking about, where maybe it's housing, maybe it's something else, some sort of public benefit, and maybe the staff can come up with what that is or some ideas, and at a future date we can talk about it.
Prohibiting hotels in the downtown.
It's a size thing. I think that in the downtown there should be a limit on the size. I don't know what that number is. Kind of like what Councilmember Gold was saying, like visitor lodging, I think is okay as part of something, but not in the form of a hotel that's larger. I'm in favor of making that no longer a permitted use.
Okay. And what about New Yorkers?
I'm, generally as I'm getting my legs here in planning decisions, I'm really not in favor of making. So if you have the permitted, prohibited, and conditional, right? So you kind of that scale. I'm not in favor of making the jumps. I'm okay with making adjustments, but not the jumps. So in other words, I'm okay going from permitted to conditional. I'm not okay with going from permitted to prohibited for the hotels, right? So, and as far as the obviously, I do like the idea of a workforce housing aspect of that condition, but I think that as far as size is concerned, I think really it comes down to let's have the staff come up with some impacts, and then let's look at ways to mitigate those impacts. Size, I mean, look, if we come up with a hostel that has a no car policy, and they have 40 keys on the north side of the maybe that would work. I don't know. I think that it would be really that's what to me the beauty of the conditional use permit is that it allows us to have those kind of intelligent, not draconian rules, and allow some flexibility. So is that sufficient?
I'm hearing what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. And then Vice Mayor.
I tend to lean more with Councilmember Niokas. I would caution though to kind of get into this place where if we're discussing just tourist rooms, like small, tiny 1 or 2 scattered around, it's hard to do a affordable housing linkage fee or have somebody that's doing a couple rooms. I'm not advocating by any means for we got to go big just for that benefit, but I think that's an important distinction to keep in mind. I would tend to lean more toward what Councilmember Nayoka said, and I think ultimately this is a prime thing. I think one of the options was to discuss it at the goal setting when we can look at exactly what the staff time is in this, how this rates in our goals for. Do we want to fix the water leaking problem on Powell Street? Do we want to discuss this? I mean, there's the whole list that we can go through. And where does this sit? Is this at the very top? Is it at the very bottom? Is it somewhere in between? And I think that discussion needs to happen along with what we're doing tonight so that during the goal setting, we can be clear like, okay, in the next year, this is where we want it or this is where we want it. And I think that's, I'm anticipating the goal setting to be a pretty robust discussion with community members involved. And I think that kind of sets the tone going forward for the next year of what we're going to be focused on with this issue.
Thank you. Councilman McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into too many of the details with, the inclusionary piece, but, when someone builds a one-off unit, there's some sort of inclusionary housing fee, right? And if you don't get to the point where you actually reach a unit, you pay a fee, and that goes into a fund, and then something like that could be used to pay for something, for instance, like what we did on Center Street with the 8-unit apartment complex, right, where you were able to realize affordable housing that was not affordable before, and now it is in perpetuity. So that's what I'm talking about here. Is like it's not about it's about the benefits and the impacts, and I don't know what the number is, and I think that a future discussion is important to have to find out what that number is. What size is allowed and what isn't, and various things like that. And then what I was talking about with with that as well is that outside of the downtown, an inclusionary housing ordinance on larger properties too. And I think that what we saw at 110 Dry Creek, which I can't say it happened organically. I think it was our brilliant city manager that
It was
made
a
that
team
happen.
Everybody participated in the conversation.
Yeah, and now we have 38 affordable housing units where normally we would have had none. So I think that's the thing that really, to me, just kind of showed that. And I think Vice Mayor Higley, you're absolutely right that the Healdsburg name and the kind of being in Healdsburg, it's for a developer. I think it puts them at a premium, right? Like it's where you want to be. So what can you give us so that you can do what you want to do? And I think taking advantage of that for the residents is something I'm interested in. And I know that once the property is built and people come and stay in it, there's a steady stream of revenue that go into our general fund, our Parks and Rec, and our Affordable Housing Fund. And that right there is something that that every person who's staying there is putting money into things that are used by residents. But at the outset, I think that you can do something where you would build a unit, or you would fund a project like, say, the Cherry site, for the farmers market or for an outdoor venue. What kind of benefit can you extract from that developer to make happen what we want for the city to benefit the residents? So I don't know the exact things. I think the staff probably have a better handle on the mechanisms and how everything works. And I think that we're up here, we're all talking about this. I think we all kind of understand, and I actually think a lot of us are kind of saying the same thing. But I think I hear that maybe we want to have a longer conversation too, and maybe a little more detail. I don't know, Mayor.
I'm just not sure, because tonight, again, what is the issue? We're bringing up the issue. Do we want to value this question of our downtown core and the way that we're having it seen, used, and how it balances with the people that live here? So we heard a tremendous amount of public input. I have no problem going with a motion tonight to ask, again, staff. She's been here. I mean, you wanted to get out here, see your son tonight here. Director Heroes, I know you're here you're in the hot seat tonight. You've been doing a lot of work. And I just feel really awkward about just saying, yeah, let's talk about it later, and not come to some resolution tonight about, do we value what we're hearing about the downtown area having enough hotel rooms? I just think that we need to get clear about that. But if we're not going to do that, then we move to the next level, which is, what do we want staff to do next, and direct staff? So do you have some thoughts, City Manager?
I have some thoughts.
Okay.
Whether they're good thoughts will be determined. So we have a survey, and it's not going to be the magic elixir, if you want to call that. It's going to be broad questions about the growth of hotels in Healdsburg. Too fast, they're going to talk about number of hotels in Healdsburg. Are there too many? Just about right? Things like that. So you'll get a sense of where the community feels about growth. It's not specific to the downtown. It's much broader in nature. But that'll give you a sense of kind of where the community as a whole feels. And the accuracy rate, I think, is plus or minus 4% based on the polling data. That'll be another tool for you. And again, we're trying to get all of this information to you prior to the goal setting. We're also going to have Mr. Eiler present some macroeconomic information on how Healdsburg's doing, not specific to hotels, but just to give you a sense of business mixes and things like that with regards to the vibrancy of the downtown, or of Healdsburg specifically. And so all that information will be given to you prior to your goal setting piece of it. So my thoughts is you'll have more information at your disposal to make these difficult decisions in about another month or so. I believe I do hear consensus in one item here from council, which is that you would like to explore some type of inclusionary, whatever you want to call that, how we can leverage the Healdsburg development of hotels, wherever they may be. I think the question which still has to be answered is, do we take a look at limiting them in the downtown area or not? And it sounds like there's not consensus quite on that, but it sounds like to me, maybe I'm wrong, it sounds like to me there is consensus on at least exploring what that would look like if Healdsburg were to look at some type of inclusionary housing in the downtown, actually citywide with regards to hotels, and I would probably want to link that to other commercial businesses as well, but allow staff to explore that. So that's what I'm hearing so far. But
Okay,
again,
may I interrupt you,
misread
City
that.
Manager?
Absolutely.
Just for a minute, because I'm maybe hearing it differently, but I could be very much in my own frame of reference. So let's stop for a minute and talk. Is this survey that you're putting out something that you could actually zero in on the downtown area or not? You're saying it's too late for your survey company to add a question specifically about the downtown plaza area and ask the questions that are been raised
Sure,
tonight?
it's not it's what. So the intent of the survey initially before tonight's meeting was to look at city services and to see where we can improve upon, where we're good, the bad, and the ugly of what we're providing our community. Based on the livability discussions we've had recently, we added some questions on the back end of it to really talk about the growth of hotels and the impacts of tourism, and to give council a general assessment. So that's what the questions are.
I'm just asking if it's plausible for you to implement a question that specifically addresses what citizens tonight.
I don't know. I'd have to go back. I thought the survey was starting tomorrow,
I'm
but
just questioning if it's a possibility.
I don't know. I can find that out.
Okay.
But
I would
won't know till
hesitate to
tomorrow.
do that because most regular people, they're not really aware of what is the downtown zone. And it's just, I think it's just like a level of complication that somebody who's picking up the phone while they're washing the dishes is not really going to be able to get to that level of specificity. So I wouldn't really think we should try to go down that road.
Anyone else think that we have a responsibility to ask about the downtown core? Because that's what this whole issue was. It was specifically addressing a geographical location. It wasn't all hotels. It was specifically asking for the downtown core hotels to be looked at. So I was just bringing that up.
Can I? So I don't favor messing with this survey that we've been talking about for a long time about city services. Anyway, I don't favor messing with this survey. I think that we need to have, similar to what Councilmember or Vice Mayor Hagley was talking about, a different conversation with a work session, with a meeting with public and all that stuff. But I think what we're all talking about up here is some sort of inclusionary piece. And but I would concur that I don't see a majority of us wanting to change the hotel's situation downtown.
So your statement is that you don't think this council that just talked is suggesting that we need to look at the downtown area differently because it's by the plaza and all that for the residents to look at the balance. You don't see any of that up here. These 5 people that are sitting there, or 4
I'm not
people.
seeing the direct direction to staff of go out and do that. I'm saying, I'm hearing the consensus. What I hear is that we want to have a little bigger conversation on it. Okay. But then I also hear that everybody wants to talk about this inclusionary thing, and that's they're in favor of that. That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely consensus, the inclusionary, which you're calling workforce housing, but you're meaning the same thing. Okay, so I don't know what to do other than to say we're not ready, apparently, unless someone wants to make a motion to actually go forward with any kind of a statement where we're going to all support any changes in hotels right now. But what I do hear, at least from one person, if you want to add, there is an issue of having more understandings of the impacts of that. There was a size issue that came up, and also I wanted the staff to explore how limiting or prohibiting more hotels would actually support our general plan when we talk about over-concentration, but that didn't fly with other people, so I'm just going to make sure that's out there. So what do you suggest we do other than have a bigger conversation? When would you like to have that conversation? Does anyone have any ideas, or do you want me to make the proposal?
I think that, clearly we would like staff to investigate the hotel, affordable housing inclusion. That seems direction. And it seems like perhaps we should continue discussing other aspects after we've gotten the results of the survey. That kind of makes sense to me. But we can't discuss it all endlessly. At some point, we have to make decisions and take action, which I think is what the public is asking us to do.
The only thing I would add is the discussion, we're really zeroing in on hotels, not just a discussion about tourists, or tourism, which is kind of, I think, a bigger discussion. We're really zeroing in and focusing the discussion on hotels. So I think that's a good thing, that to give staff direction specifically for the goal setting is just related to hotels specifically, as opposed to the broader tourism piece, because I think that's always there. But this is something that I think is worth exploring as we look at the size of our town and what is it that we want, and then also take into account the balance between the benefits and obviously the impacts. But what I like about this discussion is it's zeroing in on hotels and about that as opposed to the broader brush issue of tourism.
Well, I guess my question for the rest of you, I think workforce housing, inclusionary housing is we all agree on that. But what about specifically the actual CUP, making that CUP change? Do we want to hold off on that until we get more information from the survey and then discuss it as part of our goal setting, or do we want to direct staff to kind of provide us some direction for a decision in the meantime?
Well, staff probably has already actually given us some options of what the conditions would be, right? They've talked about, number of rooms and, amount of retail space. I mean, they've already kind of done that research. So
right,
if
but actually coming back to us with a specific, here's an actual wording change, to enact that CUP rule. That's what I'm referring to. Are we ready to ask for that?
I don't think so.
I don't think we are, because I'm not hearing consensus up here. We're all over, and I just don't know what to do. It's so lengthy to talk about just the boxes alone. I mean, I was just going to say keep it simple. Either one or you don't, but it's more complex than that, and this council doesn't seem to have, as you say, any kind of consensus.
So could I make I was going to make a suggestion that the direction we give to staff is maybe explore to bring this to the goal setting, and maybe give us some options in terms of some data on staff time, so that we can prioritize and understand what the level of staff involvement to get some of the answers that you've heard or the questions you've heard up here answered. Maybe some options in terms of timing, like, okay, SDAT will be done here. So maybe some timelines of what we can do with an endpoint of when we can have, all right, now we've got everything. Now it's decision time. It's not just keep talking time. And with that, I'll quit talking.
Okay, so it sounds like everyone's content to wait until the goal setting session, and we're going to go ahead and allow staff some time to tell us about what at least your suggestion was, to get the staff to help us directing it just on hotels and looking at that. But I still don't know what this council wants to do tonight. I'm still not hearing enough. Do we just want to wait until that March?
I think what I'm hearing, with all due respect,
yes,
is that council is interested in looking at an inclusionary, whatever we want to call that, on the back end. Staff will do some investigation, provide some basic information as we go into goal setting. By goal setting, you'll have additional information which may or may not help the conversation with regards to the survey. But at that point, we'll also be able to provide you some options with regards to prioritizing where this fits on your level of importance, if you will, or capacity. And we'll have additional information provided you at that point. So I don't think what we're waiting for is get additional information. We should have some more information for you to consider at the March meeting. In the meantime, staff will do some additional exploring with regards to what this inclusionary may look like, specific to hotels, because back in January of 2017, we talked about a broader mix of a linkage fee and inclusion. This will be focused on hotels. But it sounds like to me this conversation is definitely not over, and we'll be able to narrow that conversation down as the goal setting process begins. Is that?
Yeah, I just wanted you to know that as city manager, you're negotiating all the time. So though we don't have any action tonight, I do want you to know you're sitting here listening to your council and of some public comment regarding the issue. And I just hope that we don't let this go, that we're in a flux zone. But I just want to make sure that we reflect the values of what your council just said in terms of decisions in the future. I don't know what's coming up. You're right. We have this small little town, but I'm just concerned about not getting back to this in a way that can help the people that did come out tonight on all levels, on all points of view, that they all feel like we're addressing it. So if we're just going to wait for the city council goal setting session, that's fine. That's a decision that we're all making. And then the other thing is you're going to put out a survey that's going to ask the citizens of this town to answer questions about hotels in general. So you're not going to do any geographical aspect to that survey. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so that will be available to us at the goal setting session.
That's the intent. The intent was to work with the consultant and have that information to you prior to the goal setting.
And then as far as inclusionary housing that's related to hotel development, that's something that's going to be explored before city council goals?
Right, I can give you some high level options for council to consider. I think we have enough time to do that. I'm also appreciative of the planning department's challenges or time constraints right now with all the other things happening. So I think what needs to be recognized is everything that was on tonight's agenda was driven by Maya's department, Ms. DeRossi's department, and it is a department of basically two at this point. We have new resources coming on, but I just want to commend Maya for all the work and that she's done on this. But
thank you so much for
a lot
all
of
the work.
I think it's important to recognize a lot of the really challenging community topics we're having right now, a lot of those fall within the planning department, and they're the ones that have to do the yeoman's work with regarding all of the research and things like that. So I want to be respectful of that as well. I know the community wants these answers as quickly as possible, and so does council, but there's also other things which legally we have to do through the planning department as well. So hopefully appreciate that.
Okay, so at this point, no action is being taken on this item other than the directed that we just talked about. And the only tangible aspect of this is by the time we meet for the city council goal setting session, we will be able to address this again.
You'll have additional information which will help inform council with additional information to get to a consensus hopefully on this item.
Okay, thank you, City Manager. And again, Director DeRosa, I just want to commend you so much for the work you're doing. It's very complex and it's really challenging, but I appreciate your diligence and your demeanor and your willingness to walk us through things and make us understand our options and to help us look at future and what we want to respect and what we want to obviously maintain and justify. So thank you very much. I appreciate everything you did to help us to get where we were tonight. Lots of public input, lots of different good information sources. Let's do it. All right, so old business item, we have no new business. So we're moving on to written communications.
Actually, matters of interest.
Actually, you're right, matters of interest. I was going to do that. Okay, so a new protocol in this council is that we're going to do our reports at the end when everyone's walking out or already gone. So so let's do it. So who would like to begin sharing something matters of interest since the last meeting? Thank you.
Well, I wanted to report that we have formed a subcommittee for the HDID for distribution of the district development funds. So we got our public member, that's Jan Morgan, and we had one meeting. We've pretty much drafted the description that we'll give to people who want to apply for events and activities, since that's a portion. And then there'll be infrastructure projects that will be probably more the kind of thing where the city will make proposals to us. But we're looking at a time frame of starting to get proposals on May 1, a period May 1 through July, and then we'll review them in August. And the HDID committee will make a final judgment, and we'll probably announce that in September for the events and activities, so that people can be looking for things that they could be doing maybe more during the off season. We wanted to move it right along so that they could have some off season stuff happening. And we are doing some other small grants that prior to that, but we don't want to spend the money that we haven't yet accrued. So that's the schedule.
Nothing to report.
Neokis?
Well, just I guess real briefly, Russian River Water Agency work plan. We might be getting some interesting projects as a result of the very hard work by our staff member Dirk Medina, as far as getting interesting stormwater projects that can have a big impact on the community. So shout out to staff, and too bad he's gone. But I was really impressed with what the quality of his participation in the agency, and really. And then another shout out. I attended the Chamber breakfast, the Chamber of Commerce breakfast, who asked city manager to provide a state of the city presentation, and it was really there weren't any questions. So it was either your presentation was solid, or they were just like, okay, let's go to the featured speaker. Either way, I thought it was informative, so I liked it, and that's enough.
I just have a couple things to report. Attended the mayors and council members meeting with the rest of you here. And one of the fun things that I did was late last year, I was texting back and forth with Chris Rogers, the vice mayor of Santa Rosa. And we're going back and forth like, hey, shoot, when all the mayors are in there for their meeting, maybe we should just grab a beer with all the different vice mayors. So I had an email chain going around with all the other vice mayors from the county. And kind of the purpose was in a relaxed setting to kind of connect the different communities. And it was interesting, the different conversations that would come up and talking. And so we'll try to do more of that. I attended on the 9th, I represented the council for Councilmember Gold, who couldn't make it for the Business Advisory Group meeting. And it was a real good meeting to attend. It's interesting hearing from the business owners that are affected by the roundabout, and just what the city's doing to try to keep them informed on the progress. Had an NCPA Finance Committee phone call, which lasted a long time. And then another thing that lasted a long time was on Wednesday, on Valentine's Day, from 10 a.m. to about 3 o'clock, I was at the NCRA Directors Meeting in Santa Rosa at the Board of Supervisors Chambers. So lots of exciting stuff happening, but that's it for what I have to report. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just like to tell everyone I met with Carla Howell, the Chamber of Commerce Executive Director, I think is her title, and talked to her for a while about the roundabout on the 7th. And then David Hill I met with for about an hour, the Replay Resorts developer, and that was a good meeting. And then I also went to the mayor's meeting with the four of us, and it was good. I thought it was interesting, the gentleman from the Sonoma County Office of Emergency Services presentation about emergency preparation and Sonoma County's responsibilities and all that. It was really powerful. So I think we're going to have a meeting with, or we're going to get a check-in from our own chief about fire at our next meeting.
Yeah, if you want me to go through the couple agenda items when you're done, I'd be happy to do
Okay, so I just want to mention, I did talk to Chief Boaz about that, because as a city, I would really like us to get in tune with some emergency preparation and registration, and just get an update a little bit more about where we're headed. Okay, so that's what happened with me. And would you like to add something?
Thank you, Mayor, Madam Mayor. So a couple upcoming agenda items as a reminder. Monday the 26th, we'll have our Measure V meeting starting at 5 o'clock in these chambers. At the next regular council meeting on March 5th, Chief Boaz will be giving an update on fire-related activity. There'll be a badge pinning, and I believe we'll also officially be swearing in Raina, our Deputy City Clerk. So you'll be seeing a lot more Raina here in the near future, sitting in Maria's desk, and we'll have Maria close by. And then another item which will be on the 5th will be the pedicab. There's been a request to allow pedicabs in town, so we'll be bringing that forward to council as well.
Okay, so with that, I would like to just mention the written communications from the building and planning director, and no action needs to be taken on that. But and then I think that's pretty much it. What a lively night it was tonight. Thank you, everybody. I'm now going to adjourn the City Council meeting of February 20th, 2018.